April 16th. And at that meeting, parents asked us to come back. And so here I am back tonight to number one, hear your concerns, hear your thoughts, and then also on, if you want to share those thoughts and those concerns with the board, that board meeting is going to be scheduled for April 16th. And so, before I do any introductions of staff that's in the room with us right now, do we have any elected officials in the room that want to introduce yourself? Okay, so I'm going to start with my deputy superintendent. This is Mrs. Lilia Fuentes. We also have our director of special ed here, Claudia Ruiz, our director of elementary education, Dr. Ambrose, and we also have our director of pupil and community services and also oversees community schools, Jesse Altamirano, and then our director of governmental relations, and Mrs. Ronnie Lawrence. We also have our director also of pupil and community services over parent engagement, Madeline Cordero, and then our chief business officer is Sandra Garcia. So they're all part of cabinet, and so they're here, they're gonna help. If I get stuck on any questions, I'll make sure that I call on them to help with any responses. But really tonight was to listen to you guys. How many of you guys went to, or let me just put it this way, how many of you did not go to the last presentation that I did? Okay, I'm gonna do a quick synopsis of what I talked about in that meeting so that I can kind of catch you guys up. So, part of the problem in California right now is that pretty much all the districts across the state are experiencing declining enrollment. And that's a reality for not just Pomona, but it's a reality for Walnut. It's a reality for, many of the districts across the state. We're also experiencing the impact of high housing costs, and we're also experiencing the impact of low birth rates. So that being said, we are declining just like many other districts. You are probably hearing about in the news, many districts are making the decision to consolidate schools. And we have consolidated schools in Pomona as well. A district our size should have about 32 schools. Currently, we have 38 schools in the district, which means some of our schools are very, very small. For example, Armstrong is down to 249 students, and a large percentage of the students that come to Armstrong come here on transfers. And so that's the reality of what we're facing. And I for the folks that came to the last presentation, I walked you through the PowerPoint. I shared that information with you. And if you didn't get to see that PowerPoint and you're interested, you want me to send you a copy. If you want to leave your information here with us today, I will share that complete PowerPoint with you so you can kind of see those slides and see why we're making this very difficult decision. Now I will say, guys, I understand this is more than just about money and buildings. I know we have kids that go to school here. I know this is impacting families. I know that a decision by the board on this would impact staff. So I understand the feelings and the emotion associated with this, and this is not an easy recommendation for me to make. And so, but at the same time, we have to be good stewards of the money that we do have, and so that we have to, we have to make recommendations based on that money sometimes. And so that's why it's put us in a very difficult position where we have to make some recommendations, not only about Armstrong, but also about Marshall Middle School, and also about moving a program at Harrison Elementary School. And so this is kind of the tip of the iceberg. There are still some other things, other recommendations that we will have to make in the future. Because number one, we also have to keep up pace, number one, with maintaining our facilities, and we also have to, we have to pay the employees that work here. We have to pay them a fair wage. And so that being said, if I can't offer a fair wage, I can't go out and get the best teachers and get the best classified employees and the best people to work with our kids. And again, I understand this is more than just about buildings and money. I got that. And so I'm not gonna win that conversation with you guys. I'm not even gonna try. But I do need to let you know that as superintendent, I have to do what's fiscally right also, and sometimes which means that I have to make very difficult recommendations to our Board of Education. If you want to come and voice your opinion to the board, you can come on April 16th and share with the board your concerns. At the last meeting, I talked to parents here, and parents shared ideas and there were a lot of questions about, well, what if we change the school and make it a kind of a magnet school? What if we recruit kids? The reality of that is that, just like Pomona, Walnut is also declining also. A large majority of the kids in Walnut come from outside of that school district. And so again, it's not just impacting Pomona, it's impacting others as well. And again, a district our size should have about 32 schools. And so one of the things that you asked last time was, you said, Mr. Knowles, how was this recommendation made, or why are you making this recommendation? And I also had Mr. Mesa just come in. Mr. Mesa is our assistant to the superintendent over facilities and maintenance and operations. So back early on, and this is not the first school that we've recommended for consolidation, we've recommended others. Back in the early 2000s, Pomona had over 35,000 students. And now we have 21,000 students in the district. And that includes a dependent charter school, actually 2 dependent charter schools. And so you can see how much we've declined. And again, that's other districts around as well. Everybody's declining at about a 2% rate. And without families having, babies, and the younger generation coming up and being able to afford affordable housing, it is going to be very difficult, and you're going to see that this scenario is going to play out it's going to play out all over California. Districts are going to be forced to make these very difficult decisions. But I also think, and I know that the board, the community just recently passed a bond, and we're very thankful for that bond, but we also want that money to be reinvested back into the neighborhood schools, and we want to make the schools nice, and we want to make sure that where we need to put in new buildings, that we put in new buildings. And so, this won't be the first recommendation that Cabinet has to make regarding the school consolidation. So early on, Fernando, what year did we start the committee? Do you remember the date? 2012. So back around 2012, we put together a committee, and that committee was made up of parents, it was made up of administrators, it was made up of the union leadership, it was made up of classified employees, and I think were there students on there as well? So we had a committee that basically what they did was they had a conversation that should the district have to make a recommendation for a school consolidation, this is how we would do it. And so they listed 30, 40 possible criteria that the district would use. And what happened was that they settled on these. They settled on capacity of the school in general. They settled on the facility operating cost per student, the utilization of the campus with portables, the facilities condition index, the facilities condition assessment, how much it would cost to renovate the school if we had to renovate it. And then also looked at the per student total facility operating costs. And then it also looked at proximity to the border of another school. Armstrong was on that list from 2012. They were very close to the top. As a matter of fact, one of the schools that we closed first in Pomona was one of our largest elementary schools. And we closed it because it was an overflow school. And so Armstrong has been on this list for quite some time. And I know there's been rumors in the community about the consolidation, not just this year, but I know in probably the last 3 to 4 years, there's definitely been rumors because I've heard it myself. And so this is the criteria. I did, because this is a working draft, and I did share this with Mrs. Tedesco. Anybody wants a copy of this, I'll be glad to provide it to you. But we did take out the school names, and the reason we took out the school names was because I don't want to create a panic here or create more rumor when sometimes people may share this or have conversations in the community, and then some of the conversation gets lost in translation. And then next thing I know, I'm creating panic when I don't need to. So right here, you can see that this school, the final ranking on this one is 24. And this school right at the very top, this group of schools right here are elementary schools. These are middle schools, and these are high schools. And so this is the document that we use. There was no recommendation from 2012 all the way to the present to close Armstrong, even though we've had the conversation about Armstrong several times. But you also have to understand that with the decline in enrollment and a 2% decline every year, that Armstrong has consistently gone down. And right now there are 249 kids in the school, and a majority of those kids, Mr. Mesa, you know off the top of your head what the percentage of transfers are here? About 50%. About 50%. So about 50% of the kids are transfers. And so, you know, you can do the math, and that'll tell you basically what we're looking at in terms of this. The other things we talked about in that last meeting is if the board decides to move forward, then what happens next? So we talked about, we would have a transition plan, not only for the students, but also for the staff. Now this is an open enrollment school district. The plan, the recommendation is to consolidate Armstrong with Golden Springs. And we would also be doing upgrades to that campus. That school was most recently also named as a California Distinguished School. But the school does need some work. There was also an issue brought up about the restrooms there, and we've been able to look at that very closely, and we've been able to resolve that. The question was, are there enough restrooms for the kids there? And the answer to that question is yes, but we did have a couple of the restrooms that were closed off, and they allowed the staff to use them. We would be reopening them back up to students, and as we make modernizations to that campus, we would be adding some restrooms on that campus. But the real issue for that campus right now is the restrooms for staff, not students. And that's something that we could easily solve. So, that being said, we also talked about transition for staff. Now I know that because we're making this recommendation, districts can only notice employees for a layoff once a year. And you can do it twice, but it's really hard to do it in the summer. There's a whole bunch of steps you have to take in order to notice a classified employee during the summer. So that notice period is March 15th. So one of the things that we would be doing is moving over as many staff from Armstrong as possible, and that includes the campus supervisor. We want to make sure that when we're supporting the kids, that when they go to a new school, there are friendly faces there, that people that they know. So we will work with Mrs. Tedesco to make sure that we do that. And so the staff, we would also have an orientation for the kids. We would do something fun. And then we also, just like we did for Diamond Point when we made the recommendation to consolidate Diamond Point, we would also make a recommendation to have some form of closure for this site and the community. So the next question, and I've heard, you know, I don't chase social media because I can't, I don't have time to. But I do know that, you know, some people will come up and say, well, Mr. Knowles, the school district is selling Armstrong to BlackRock. That is absolutely false. We are not selling the school to BlackRock. Now what has to happen though is that if, for next year, if the board decides to consolidate Armstrong with Golden Springs, our after-school learning enrichment program, and you guys see the kids coming out at 6, that program services the entire district. That program would be housed here until the board makes a decision on what they wanted to do with the campus. Now, in order for a board to do anything with the campus, it has to go through what is called the 7-11 committee. And that committee is a representation of the community, and then that committee makes a recommendation to the board, and then the Board of Education can either accept or reject that recommendation. In this case, you know, we've talked about several things because Pomona there's quite a bit of surplus property that we have right now. We want to take that and we want to do housing with it. We've talked about teacher housing for our classified employees. We've talked about low density, medium density housing. We've also talked about, you know, ways that we can do leases, long-term leases. The rule is that if the district sells a property and it gets developed by a home developer, that money has to be reinvested into the facilities in that school district. And so that would have, that if any money that was used from this, now the only exception to that is that if the district were to lease this land, say we entered into a 99-year lease with somebody, the money that came from that lease then could go to the general fund, and that money could be used for program, okay? So it could be used for a sports program, it could be used for instructional program, it could be used for tutoring, it could be used pretty much for anything at that point. So the board will consider all those options, but we have talked about employee housing. If anybody here is a homeowner, at the last meeting, I did share that if any homeowners and your kids have grown up and they went to Armstrong, but you're concerned about what's gonna happen to the school, I said I would come and meet with you specifically in the evening or in the morning, and then make sure that, you know, that I'm sharing information with you. I don't want people leaving the meeting not having your answers or your questions answered. I don't want rumors to happen, or I don't want people speculating. If you want an answer to your question, you're more than welcome to come directly to me. My office is always open to you, and I'll answer your question. And if I can't answer your question, I'll find somebody that can answer your question from staff. But I wanna make sure we're transparent, and if I know the answer, I'll provide that answer to you. I know that, you know, one of the questions was, you know, does my child have to go to Golden Spring? We are an open enrollment school district. You can apply to go to any school you want to. But I will say that when it comes to the transfers, we will, whenever there's a consolidation, we prioritize the kids from that consolidation. So before I consider, you know, for example, if, say somebody wanted to go to Ranch Hills or go to Decker, and let's say I have 5 spots over there. Before I consider any spots from any other schools in the district, I would prioritize them for this particular school, okay? Am I missing anything on the transition plan you guys can think of? I know there were questions about special ed. I have Claudia Ruiz here for special ed and also for child development. Anybody that has a child in the child development program, we got, you know, there were concerns about that. I think we answered those at the last meeting, but I have staff here. I'm gonna open it up to questions for you. And then I think that some of the parents were gonna get together and you guys had some ideas that you wanna be, you know, wanted me to share with the board. And so I'll hear those, we'll take notes, but I'm gonna open it up at this time for questions, okay? So I'm done talking at this point, unless you ask me a question, I gotta answer. Gonna get the ball rolling.
Well, since I wasn't here in the last meeting, you said 249 now. Can you go back to 2 years? Just give me, what was last year's count of students?
Last year was about probably 260 maybe?
Yes.
And then the year before that?
Yeah, probably another 15 kids or so.
In talking about consolidation, going to the other school over here, I've had a couple of parents ask, well, why can't they come here? Is it based, they're a California distinguished school, but this school is also a school of merit.
It is.
So why can't they come here and still have their school? And I don't know the size of the campus, is it, we're talking dollars, is it economically more feasible to make improvements and upgrades here, or just smaller, or bigger?
This is where not having my school name is gonna bite me right here, but that's a great question. And so, part of it is that Golden Springs can accommodate the students from this campus. It would be difficult for this campus to accommodate the students in Golden Springs. Also, when it comes to actually facility conditions, when it comes to modernizing a campus, this site needs quite a bit more money into it than Golden Springs does. So that's probably 2 of the biggest factors.
Okay, so there's one.
She had a question first. and then I'll come to you.
On that, you mentioned that there wasn't enough restrooms for staff, to where they took a restroom for staff, or they took 2 restrooms from the kids to accommodate the staff. So now the staff will be down 2 restrooms?
Well, we can bring in restrooms for the staff,
And
and
you
we are
said that would be
planning.
quickly fixed? How long would that take?
Won't take long at all. We
How
are
long?
planning to do some additional portables while we consider any building options on that campus.
And how long would building options take?
Okay, so that's a great question. Okay, so let me talk about building in general. So for example, right now, we're looking at putting a new building on Lexington's campus. Lexington is a K-8, and it's in, so what happens is that you go through a design process, okay? And then you have, from that design process, it goes to the architects. And then from the architects, it goes to kind of a plan. And then from that plan, it has to go to the Department of State Architecture. And then they have to approve your plan. Once they approve your plan, it goes out to go to bid, okay? And then after it goes to bid, it has to be built, and then you close out the project. So for a new building like that, from start to finish, it could be, Fernando, 3 years, 4 years. Portables is a little bit quicker, but for a new building like that, you're talking that period of time.
Okay, so 3 to 4 years, but you want us to go in a few months?
Correct.
And you think that's okay?
Well, I did the analysis on the restrooms. The students have enough restrooms, and that was your concern.
Yes, but I'm also relating back to the question of whether or not this school can accommodate those other students.
Portables to actual facility.
Oh, the ratio of portables to actual
That's what
facility.
you're inquiring about.
Oh, yeah, I'll learn more about that.
What's your question?
The ratio of portables to actual structural facility. What would that ratio be on Golden Springs campus?
I don't have that off the top of my head.
But moreover, so the Golden Springs project, it failed once already. So Golden
What
Springs was
project?
expanded before. It encumbered elementary through 8th grade, right?
Correct.
Were the parents satisfied with that?
Well, it's no longer a K. I
No,
don't think that
I'm
was
just
a,
saying, when they did that expansion and had that number of students on that particular campus, did it work?
well, that wasn't the issue. The issue wasn't enrollment. The issue was about access to program for the middle school students. That was the question.
I was around in Diamond Bar, the issue was the crowded campus, the traffic was terrible, there weren't enough bathrooms, the facilities that they had provided were temporary portables. Understand this, the homeowners in Diamond Bar pay some of the highest taxes in the state. Pomona Unified has taken out 3 bonds, not one, for a total of over $900 million with little to no accountability. They have been riddled with lawsuits from sexual assaults and rape. So while we're talking about moving Diamond Bar kids to Pomona, where these atrocities are happening, that's never gonna fly with the homeowner here. Whether we have smaller class sizes, which is beneficial for our students, right? But also we're paying for those classes. Homes in Pomona, they bring in, what, 1/3 of the taxes, 1/4 of what the tax rate is here in the city? So the fact that the schools, and I don't know if you've ever tried this, but try getting your child, an elementary school child, in TK, 1st grade, even 2nd, into an elementary school. Every school in this city was impacted except for New Armstrong. That was the only place that you could send a child in this city, and I did it with my 10-year-old now. But at the time, she was leaving Montessori post-COVID. This is the only school that would even take her. It was that, would take her to a completely different city, which puts an immediate hardship on working parents, on working families. It takes away a legitimate resource. It takes away fair access to education from children in low-income households who are living in Pomona and have no idea that they can come to school in Diamond Bar. They wish their kids could attend school here, because this means something to those kids, right? I grew up in Diamond Bar, my parents had money, right? So they could buy my way through the system, right? But for the kids in Pomona, they don't have that access. The district is spending how many $1 million? And I mean, we have someone who can answer the question, right? On integrating a new curriculum involving the minority outlook. I'm not sure what the
Ethnic
exact
studies.
word is. Right. So what we would talk about is the educational disparity immediately in minority communities. This is a minority-based school where these kids can come, receive a fair and equitable education, and you're talking about taking that resource from families who don't even know it's available. Families in Pomona don't even know there's a bus route to this school. No idea. It was conveniently forgotten, right? There's been no allowed, increase of enrollment drives. There's been 0 visibility. We have circumvented all measures to increase enrollment. You are right, Walnut Unified is not struggling. I know Walnut Unified because my other children go there. They are not cutting a single teacher position, they are not cutting a single school, and when you ask them what the difference is, they will tell you fiscal accountability. This district has been in several major news outlets for the lack of fiscal accountability, for the hundreds of millions of dollars paid out in assault and abuse claims, which were proven, right? So where's the 900 plus, $907 million? This is not an Armstrong issue, this is a city of Diamond Bar issue, right? Every homeowner here has a say-so in whether or not this school closes.
And it's
And
pretty
it's
sick to
not
blame people for
being-
not having more kids
It's not
as your
being focused on.
excuse to close a school
Well,
when
here's
we're
the thing.
funding, sorry.
Again, here's the thing, not even all the parents know the school's closing. So that tells you right there, there has been an inadequate amount of communication from the district to parents of this school, of this community. There's been zero transparency, even though the president of your board is married to a city councilman and city official for Diamond Bar, which I'm sure is how you guys think this is gonna get passed, it's not, right? There's no accountability for where all of these funds and resources, so you ask us for $385 million. It gets approved, thinking we're going to maintain our schools. The city of Diamond Bar has how many elementary schools? 3. 3 options, 2 of which you can't get into. From personal experience as a parent, right? I am not a superintendent, I had to call there. And they told me there was no room for my child. So you're telling me that the people of this community who pay the most, never mind how many kids there are, we can't afford them anymore because we are paying for it, right? Cannot have a school functioning in their community. I have seen lots of Pomona Unified properties dilapidated, vacant, a blight to the community, home to vagrants, transients. My sister is the head of parole. One of their department heads, they had to kick in doors on some of your facilities looking for their sex offenders, okay? Who wants that blight in your community smack in the middle of Diamond Bar? Furthermore, when we say that you're selling to BlackRock, we're not stupid. Lennar Homes is BlackRock. They are 90% shareholders in Lennar Homes. That is who has been buying up all of these old school sites and then repurposing them as affordable, by the way. $1.5 million is not affordable to the average American, right? Not affordable to the average Diamond Bar citizen, right, anymore. We're getting priced out. That's not affordable housing. That's definitely not teacher housing. Now let's move on to the teacher salary. Fair salaries. Why is it then, if we are paying all of these funds from our tax revenue, that our teachers in our areas are not receiving an equitable wage? That is another thing. No, you're not going to get quality candidates when they can go 2 streets over the Walnut and make 30% more. You are correct, right? The other issue that we're going to have is that those numbers are empirically biased, right? So we don't need to be stepped through things. I'm working on my 3rd master's in architecture, so I don't need to know about the approval process. What I do know though is staff. So when I quant that all out, because I'm a quant queen, those staffs are biased. The reason that they're biased is because the operating cost on any school in the city of Diamond Bar is automatically going to be higher than something in the middle of Pomona. The property value is higher, the average expected wage is higher, the utility cost, is higher. So that inherently puts Diamond Bar schools at the top of the chopping block every time we do this. Every single time. Not to mention, when we look at the statistical data, this is not the first elementary school you guys have chosen to close in the city of Diamond Bar, right? So if in fact we're using empirical data that's inherently biased to do that, now we're on the 2nd school that we're losing. Why are the citizens of Diamond Bar expected to continue to foot the bill for Pomona? Right? So, fair. I don't mind paying tax dollars for a school in our neighborhood. I have access. Access is important, right? But to deny our children fair access to education, close our schools, and then give Pomona alternatives is unacceptable. Unacceptable. Not to the people who pay the most. So when I sit here and see hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Diamond Bar financing with no accountability. I see board members and presidents who should recuse themselves from any vote. You have another board member that should have recused himself too, because all of this stuff involves construction. When he sat there in the last board meeting and I sat there and I listened, he didn't recuse himself once, but all of his financiering comes from the labor unions that are employed by those contractors. So when the electrical union jobs get pipelined through him and he's approving things, right? These earmarked school district contracts, that's not ethical. Actually, in fact, I argue to say it's not legal, right? So that's the other thing. So also the bond measure oversight, and I keep hearing that Mr. Meza is being inducted into the conversation. The problem is, Mr. Meza will not be here, correct? He's leaving because the district pink slipped him. So then who in fact is overseeing any of this? Any of this construction, any of these portables you wanna stick these kids in? So the children of Diamond Bar, whose parents are paying for this, have to sit in dilapidated portables on an overcrowded campus. They have to lose playground space, because where else are you gonna put them? You can't overrun these houses, they're gonna lose playground space. The teachers don't have adequate facilities. The facility at Golden Springs is dilapidated, and the Golden Springs parents don't even know this is happening. You haven't even had the conversation with them.
Yep.
How many of these parents do you think are going to stay when we get our $10,000 check that says that we can all just leave and go to private school or a magnet school or whatever, right? Then what kind of enrollment process do you think you're going to have? What kind of budgetary concerns do you think you're going to have? In a community where we can afford to write the other check, right? We're going to write the other check. If you allow our education to dip, we are out. And that's why this school is struggling, is because you didn't recruit adequate staff and so on. But in the grades that do have the appropriate staffing and under the new leadership of the new principal, we are seeing a retention of new employees, or not employees, new students. We're seeing where the TK and pre-K classes are full, are they not? There's multiple, right? Those kids are gonna be in first grade next year, second the next, third the next. So we're actually tracking towards an incline, which those numbers don't take account for because they're antiquated. Has anyone made an effort to review that?
Since 9/12?
Yeah, those numbers are not antiquated.
The last time, and this is from the attorney that we spoke to that the district said, those numbers were run, it was mid-pandemic, pre-pandemic?
Those are current numbers, right?
Okay.
And they were run before COVID, and they were run back in 2000.
Based on a system made in
So they were
2012?
run before COVID, so.
Because the numbers change all the time, guys.
Right, but before we make a closure in 2025, we want to use a number from 2020? That's considered antiquated data.
Those are current numbers, you guys.
That's 2025. That's not what the attorney who represents the district gave us or told us.
Well, I don't know what Ms. Moore said, but we
It's a
definitely can.
female attorney.
We can probably Joyce you.
Yeah,
you.
Joyce.
Yeah, we can provide both of those. So you can look at both of them.
And we asked for an
Unscrambled one?
unscrambled version, right, of it as well. But you can imagine the public outrage. So when homeowners, by the way, are finding out about this, because I know Pomona cares about being a good neighbor, they don't feel like you guys are being good neighbors, they feel like you're stealing their money. They do. And so when we're saying things like, what is going to happen to this school? You know, when we talk about affordable housing, there's no teacher. There is no teacher that is paying $1.5 billion for a house. There's, right? And then do we want low-income housing, if that's what you're proposing, in the middle of a high-end community? What does that do to the homeowners here? If that's what you're posing. I mean, I can see a decrease in home value and an immediate problem with that. And while this school is semi-closed, right, what are we going to do about the potential of vagrants or homeless or what have you, and the non-use of the facility? And wouldn't the facility cost just be a sunk cost anyway, because you're still saying that you're gonna keep it open for the TK students to still attend? You can't let the roof fall off, so you're still paying to
The
maintain.
TK students, what?
Not
After school
children who are
program.
using the child.
TLC.
No,
TLC.
it would just be staff, you guys.
Well, you
There would
just
be no-
said
there
that
would
these
be-
were-
I said the after-school program has staff.
Okay, and
It's
in
not
order to
the
have
actual
staff here,
kids.
you would still have to maintain the property, keep the water fine, right?
For a period of time.
Correct, which would then be considered a sunk cost, would it not? Economically speaking.
Well, I mean, everything is a process. So there's gonna be, the district has to take care of the facility during the interim. So that program would be here, not kids, but the program, and the staffing would be here for that program, so.
Are you aware of how many signatures there are currently on the petition? And what was the result?
I understand how petition guys, how they work, all that good stuff.
Mhm.
But when the dust settles, I still have to make a recommendation to the board.
Mhm.
And so that recommendation has to be based on what's gonna be best for the future of the kids here in Pomona.
In
Diamond
Pomona.
Bar.
But you're
That's
not-
what you just said. Thank you.
Diamond Bar.
That's all I'm
Diamond
trying to
Slip of
get
the
to.
tongue.
But
Yes,
No,
sir.
here's
it's
the
not.
thing, here's the
No,
thing.
it's
Here's
not.
the
That was
thing.
fine.
You're-
No, it's
You
not.
just, you said it.
You
You
just
said
said
it.
it yourself.
Pomona, Pomona.
Let's not go there.
Hey, Mr. Knowles, by all due respect, it's been a month and a half. It's, and out of respect for us, because it's a month and a half that you're giving us
Out of
to
respect.
deal with this.
But
And of course,
here's
you're
the
gonna get
thing.
us frustrated.
I understand.
So
But
for all
don't come
parents-
up here and just because I pause on something, that you're just gonna say, okay, I got you now. That's not the way this works.
But there's
So you're saying you
The
got us?
reality is, guys, we're trying to be transparent, we're trying to tell you why we're making the recommendation. You have points, I got your point.
If there's $23
But
million,
ultimately-
and I mean, this is the low end number that I can recall off the top of my head, but Mr. Mays is here, so you can correct me. In new construction and upgrades to Pomona schools, how much of that is Diamond Bar money?
So when you talk about the bonds, there's a process for the bonds to be audited and there's oversight. All of that stuff goes to the board, all of that stuff. Any bonds that have been happening, we'll be glad to give you where every dollar has gone. And you can take a look at it. That's it.
And who's
You can get that
overseeing
through a
that?
public records request. You can contact
We
my
did the
office and
public
we'll get
records
that.
request.
And we'll
We
get that
haven't
to you.
received it yet.
Did you ask specifically for that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we'll get that to you.
We
Joyce,
did.
Joyce will make sure you get
And
that.
Choice is in the process of getting a lot
So
of
let me,
documents.
I'm gonna come back to you, but we have a question back here.
You talked about, you know what, can I get the mic, please? You got a mic back there?
Can you get the mic?
Yes,
Oh,
I wanna make sure people hear me. Thank you so much, sir. So Mr. Knowles, you're speaking of being transparent. You know how the Golden Springs families found out about tonight's town hall? Through me. I was standing outside there this afternoon at pickup, and I was telling them there was a town hall, and that we had gotten surveys through the district. They have not had one single survey. They did not know about this town hall happening a day after spring break. And you're telling me you're gonna be able to fill up this room and we're gonna be transparent, and they're gonna be affected as well. They already were affected once by another elementary school's closing in the district. So how are you being transparent when they have no idea these town halls are happening and they haven't even got a survey? And you wanna get this done in a whole week? And another question for you, when Davenport was closing, how much time did those parents have? And what was the time frame for them with the closure? Was it a month and a half, or was it more time?
We did a quick turnaround on.
What's a quick turnaround? I need a number,
Diamond
please.
Point. I don't know it off the top.
You know what I mean?
I can
Anybody
find-
here, did anybody know how long it was? Because from what I heard, it was months. Months. Not a month and a half. And it sure wasn't during a spring break and wasn't during testing.
So you guys asked for this meeting, correct?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And you guys helped schedule this meeting for today, right?
No, we did
No,
not.
No.
We did not.
No, we did not.
No, we did.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Who would pick the day after spring break?
Yes.
Your principal.
Unless,
The principal.
Well, I-
You know,
I
as a
thought there was some
resident
say in
of
the
Diamond
date.
Bar, I didn't
Here you
even
go, ma'am.
know about this meeting.
Go ahead, ma'am. You could go
If
use
it
it.
wasn't, as a resident of Diamond Bar, my child did attend the school, I didn't even know about anything of this going on. My tax dollars are going to fund what? I thought it was going here. Finding out different, it's infuriating. I mean, my child might not go here anymore, but as a resident of Diamond Bar, no, it has to stop. Enough with the money, enough with closing schools, leave it alone. Leave it to the residents of Diamond Bar.
The problem-
This should not be a decision that Pomona makes. This should be a Diamond Bar resident for them to actually come to the vote and say, you know what, this is what we want to happen in our community, in which we are spending the money to fund these schools. Because let me tell you, a lot of the other schools are falling apart, so where is this tax money going there? A lot of the schools don't even have AC running. Why? Because it hasn't worked in years. So, what there, you're gonna close those schools too?
No, because Diamond Bar equals a quick turnover.
Sorry.
Everything in Diamond Bar sells, we know this, we live here, right? So we know that our property is the most valuable, but when I drive to Pomona, why are we not capitalizing on all of that vacant land that we already have, right, to bring the books in the glass? Why did this not come up before you asked us for $385 million? Because we wouldn't have given it to you. If you told the residents of Diamond Bar, I want $385 million in the form of a bond, but I'm gonna close another one of your elementary schools, they would have said no. Do you know how many of these parents and how many of these citizens in Diamond Bar are ready to annex all the Diamond Bar schools this time? For real, straight to Walnut, because Walnut's not laying off a single teacher. Because you're lying to us right now, you're telling us that the staff members are following the kids, that is an absolute lie, because right before the last, school board meeting, we spoke to the staff members. They had an impromptu meeting where they were all assigned to different campuses and none of them were going to Golden Springs. All of the safety areas, and they were told.
You're talking about the campus supervisors.
Correct, but you
So
just
let me
said.
just say this, before you refer to me as a liar, make sure you have your facts straight, and here's the other thing.
Okay, so did
Hold on
everyone
a
in the
second.
room?
I let
Hold
you
on,
talk.
show of
I let
hands,
you talk.
Just so you
Hold on, I
know,
let
maybe
you
you're
talk.
making a mistake.
I let you talk.
Sure.
That conversation was with campus supervisors.
Correct.
not the teachers.
Okay, great. So did everyone in this room hear him say that the campus supervisors would be following the kids to Golden Springs?
I heard, yes,
We
you,
all
I
said
heard that,
that.
I
That's how
heard it
started
at
my
the last
meeting,
two
right?
town
You
hall
already
meetings
And
as
I
well.
was saying
said-
that, and
I
that the
also
kids would all have
prefaced it.
familiar faces,
I also
but that's
prefaced
not
it.
actually true.
Okay, I just also prefaced that by saying that the district had to do this before March 15th because there was one layoff notice. So HR was functioning with the information that they had at the time. The board has not made a decision to close this school yet, or to consolidate the school. So in that case, the bumping rights, if you're a classified employee, you have certain bumping rights. The positions that if we move them over, they have to be created first for somebody to bump into those positions. So there's a process to this, so it's not, that's not, you know.
So you know what your
I
staff was
prefaced
told,
the
and
beginning
this
of
is
that.
where I get very upset about that, is your staff members were told either they take reassignments or they take a pink slip. So I just wanna be clear, that you might be saying this today, but that is what they were told. They were not told about a process, oh, we have to create the positions at Golden Springs. They were not told any of that. They were told either you follow what we are telling you, follow the directive, or a pink slip. That is what they were told. And that is where we are feeling that the district is lacking in transparency, because you came here the first meeting, you said that. Parents felt better. Okay, my special needs child will have faces that they understand, that they see. The children who have special needs and have, additional IEPs and all the rest of the services, they need that, right? That was what was promised to them. So to have the staff then told something entirely different, okay? Very troubling to those parents. When you have a child that you have to acclimate to get to even go to school, when school is a scary place for them, even on this small campus, even with the staff members that they know, right? It is a struggle to do that, and then you turn around and you have the wool ripped right off your face, that, oh, no, everything that you were told is absolutely untrue, right? How much of this can we actually trust to carry through? I understand that you are at the top of the pyramid and there are lots of pieces of information that will trickle down, but I just want you to understand that although you may not be the one making these decisions and translating these messages, when you are at the forefront, you are the face person of it, you are the one who takes the brief.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
That's why I'm standing in front of you.
The buck
right
does
now.
definitely
Yeah,
stop with you.
I don't disagree.
And I can tell you that your staff members are not translating what it is that you're saying to parents.
Well,
And when we get these
let me
incongruencies,
say
we're
this,
not
there's
seeing.
certain things that have to happen, guys, you can't, when it comes to layoffs, there's a process for that.
I
Just
understand
like you said, they were given an option. When you're a classified employee, you're given options legally by ed code, that you can either bump or you can go on a reemployment list. And it's not a pink slip, it's you can go on a reemployment list.
How many
And
teachers
so-
are going on the reemployment list? Do we know?
There are, those conversations, we are not planning, there was not a teacher layoff, first of all.
I'm
That
just
would've-
asking you.
That would have had to happen in February or even January. There were no teachers that were noticed. Now, the classified employees, if the board decides to consolidate this, there are some classified positions that exist specifically with this school that aren't student dependent, that those positions would go away. If, let's just say, for example, if I'm the office manager, if I'm the office manager, I have bumping rights. And so that office manager could bump a more junior office manager in another position, and then that person would bump. Some of our classified employees started all the way from, campus supervisors, and they worked their way up. So you have bumping rights. Now, whenever a district is considering this, we do what is called we do a freeze on specific positions, because we want to anticipate if the board does make the decision, then somebody can bump into a vacancy or bump into somewhere if somebody is retiring. There's an option for that as well. So there's a lot of moving parts here, guys. Again, my office is always open. I don't want people to speculate, and I will be very transparent with you guys. And what I'm telling you right now, I will make sure it happens. But at the same
But
time,
not the
the
campus
board
supervisor.
ultimately has to make the decision. And I'm here trying to let you know why we're making the recommendation. We have a question back here.
So when you say.
Hold on a
when
second,
you
we
say
have a
that-
question back here.
Hi, my name is Jose Santos, and I'm not a parent, but certainly a taxpayer here in the area. And so I had no idea what was going on. A neighbor of mine told me, and I'm extremely concerned about the bond issues, concerned about where the money is going, concerned about the parents' concerned about potential conflict of interest between, city staff and staff at the school district. But I really like what you say, though, in the interest of transparency. So I believe that in the interest of transparency, I would hope that the district would be open to a forensic audit to see where those funds went, because I think that as taxpayers, we really need to understand that prior to any decision being made about closing Diamond Bar schools.
No, thank you, it's a good question. So, the answer to your question is that every year, the bond money that the district spends does go through an auditing process by an outside company. And so that, again, we'll be glad to share that, where all the dollars from all the bonds have gone. That's not something that, we should be able to provide to you very quickly.
In the interest of transparency, but for me, for clarity, so you mentioned the figure, there's 38 schools in the entire district, and basically, I guess we're built and can run 32 schools. So is there any hope or any aspirations for these extra buildings, these extra properties? Could they be sold in an effort to conserve and save Armstrong or any other school?
I think the big question for Armstrong is just, at this point, the enrollment is not here. So again, majority of the kids are coming, they're transferring. The majority of the kids, the neighborhood kids here, if we staff the school appropriately, this school truly would have a combo class at every single grade level. So that drives up the cost of the staffing. Again, guys, I don't wanna, again, this is more than just about buildings and money. This is about kids, I understand that. But the reality is that when a school gets so small, it's gonna be very difficult for us to say, let's consolidate this school over here that has 400 kids versus a school that has 249 students. So that's the tough recommendation that we have to make. We don't wanna make this recommendation about anybody. I'm a parent. My kids are, they're out of school now, but I don't wanna stand in front of you guys and tell you I have to recommend consolidating your school. And I know our board doesn't necessarily wanna have to make this decision. But in the long run, if you, and again, I'll be glad to share the PowerPoint with you. If you look at Pomona compared to other districts, some of the districts have more kids than us right now. They have 32 schools, we have 38 right now. And we have to start taking some action about consolidating these schools. If we keep taking bond money and spreading it across the whole system, we're not gonna be able to do a whole lot with that money. It's gotta go back in and make the schools nice, and that's what we're at.
At what point do the people who paid for the bond
Thank
get
you.
something back out of the bond?
Yeah.
I understand that people, households in Diamond Bar, we don't have as many children. We cannot. We cannot, right? We have to work, not unlike our citizens in Pomona, right? But it is cost restricted, right? So the general message here is that we pay, but we do not receive, right? So when the rest of the construction was laid out during the school board meeting, there was an apology there, sorry, Diamond Bar, that won't benefit you, right? And it got me to thinking, at what point does this benefit us? Because see, I can tell you this, during these same, 2,000 plus signatures that we garnered, the talk was also, well, why are we even still in Pomona? Why don't we take our 3 little elementary schools, our high school back? You know, long before you were superintendent, the people of Diamond Bar were lied to. Diamond Ranch was supposed to be where Kmart was, where now the Sprouts is. My sisters were supposed to go there, they went to Ganesha instead. Because parents in Diamond Bar used to have to bus their kids from Diamond Bar to Pomona for an education. And we said no more. Because if you can tell, there's a disparity across the track. And it's not one that I'm glamorizing, but very seriously, it's one that these children have to exist in, and ours did not. And we no longer wanted that to be the case. So from the very dawn of the first bond that the city of Diamond Bar approved, it was with the ideal that Diamond Bar kids stay in Diamond Bar, right? Now, are you aware of the current enrollment in Pantera? Can these kids go to Pantera?
It's open enrollment, so kids can go to
Do
any
they
of
have
those
a
schools.
space?
No.
They do
Right
not.
now, they're at capacity.
They're at
Pantera's
capacity.
capacity.
Correct, and Pantera is the only school, actually now, when I was in school, all of the Diamond Bar schools competed with one another, period, academically. It didn't matter whether it was Pomona Unified or Walnut Unified, that's no longer true, right? So, we have one school in Diamond Bar that is impacted, correct? We have another school in Diamond Bar that we are proposing to impact, right? So now you have 2 schools in Diamond Bar that are impacted, so what happens to these kids? What is it that Walnut is doing when they are not closing a single school? They are not consolidating anything, and they get less money. They are not a Title I district, they get less money than Pomona Unified, they have less operating costs, their buildings are just as old, just as dilapidated, their operating costs are just as high, if not higher, right, than Pomona Unified, and yet they have not had to have any reductions. What is the climate difference when you cross Grand Boulevard, right? And where is the accountability? Because from the Diamond Bar homeowners' perspective, it's like, well, if Pomona doesn't know what to do with our money, they can pay their own $385 million bond, and we'll just keep our schools and go to Walnut, because that's very much been the tone of the people who live here. Which, by the way, would benefit any homeowner in this area, because everyone who lives in Diamond Bar knows that as soon as you cross Grand Boulevard, your housing costs go up 20%, at least, right? Same house, same track, same builder, 20% increase, because they're not in Pomona Unified. Because Pomona Unified has become so notorious for the things that we're talking about now, that they actually are affecting people's home values. So, what is it that you are proposing, right, as an alternative? And are we even looking at a metric for education quality? I don't see the quality of education anywhere on those metrics. I don't see a single test score. I don't see anything that evaluates student performance at all. Because the kids who are going to school here in TK and kinder are getting a private school level education. I give it a lot of credit to the principal on this campus. Now that she's been brought on, she's really tried her best. But there are teachers who are crying, who feel defeated. There are new teachers who are barely credentialed, you know, who are not certain as to how to even properly administer the curriculum. So how can you say it's dwindling enrollment without looking at all of these other predisposing factors, right, that actually make the difference between whether a parent chooses to enroll here or push to get into Walnut, right? And then, like I said, where's the stopping point? Are we gonna say we're never going to close another school in Diamond Bar again now? Because that's kind of what was told the last time that you guys closed an elementary school, far beyond, you know, all these other local closures.
I don't
and
remember anybody saying that, so I wanna correct you on that, nobody ever said that.
So, I mean, how many schools of ours are you going to close?
I think that, again, I think every district's dealing with this. I think that the schools that we have to reinvest in them. We have to reinvest, we have to make up more space at Pantera, we gotta make more space at Golden Springs.
But have we looked at the monetary implications of this? So if Diamond Bar brings in 70% of the operating budget under the garnered tax income, right? Versus Pomona's percentage, do we not get what we pay for? That is what you are going to be up against every time you talk to any of these homeowners. We are paying for this, what are we paying for? We are losing again. This is a very small community. Pomona is much larger than us as a city,
Right,
right?
right.
They have many more occupants, they have a lot more schools, right? At what point are they going to start feeling the crunch of all of this to the effect that we are? This is our second school here, but for what? And have we exhausted every possible option?
So how many
Because
schools have we closed in Pomona? Five schools in Pomona?
Currently.
No, I said we've closed 5 schools.
No, I mean currently, how many are we talking about?
Well, I think there are, there's certainly, if you look at this, and we had to go a little deeper, there's other schools that are part of that discussion.
Right, but because we're talking about metrics involving education and.
The next couple
income
schools there,
disparity.
are Pomona schools.
Right, so why then are we losing a Diamond Bar school instead of one of the other schools in Pomona?
And that's a question we could go around the bush several times on. Right now, that top school up there is Armstrong.
Right.
And it's been there for a while.
And the one right beneath it, I think that operating cost is just a slight bump more, and the reality is that that community's not paying for that school. We are. How many of those schools on that list are Diamond Bar taxpayers financing? That's what I'd like to see. Our tax dollars fully pay for every school in this city, 100% and far beyond. So I'm saying, why are we always on the losing end? Well, because the operating cost is higher. Is it our fault that we live in a high-end community? The operating costs will always be higher here. Will they not?
No, that's not accurate.
Based upon?
It's based on how many kids you have, guys. A teacher costs the same here as it does in Pomona. We have the same teacher salaries here. An office manager costs the same, a principal costs the same. When you do the entire staffing cost, and you have to supplement a school because of staffing for combination classes, yeah, it drives your costs up.
And then also, what provisions have been given so far as looking at the disparity here? So if we're paying for a significant number of those, at what point does it exceed or supersede the metric that we put together?
I think, this is not an exhaustive list, guys, but remember when I told you the committee had come up with over 30 criteria? And there's no way we can look at all that. Now, this document does come into cabinet, and we have conversations about programs. We have conversations about test scores. We do have conversations about that. This is not just us picking on it. This is not just us picking on a Diamond Bar school. I'll get to you. I have a question here first, and I'll.
Mine's quick.
Go for it.
Yeah, so, when you sell land after you close a school, when you sell land in Pomona and when you sell land in Diamond Bar, which goes for more? Which sells for more?
It just depends. It depends on
He
what.
already
It's
said
not-
our
you can
land-
go to the
he
next
already
one.
said our
It depends on
land
what you-
value was
it
high
depends on what you do with
here.
it, guys.
You
doesn't-
noted the land value the last time.
No, the land value here would be awesome.
You
I'm
noted
not
it.
saying it wouldn't.
Awesome.
I'm asking, like we asked the last meeting, now the point of this meeting is to see the criteria, and I don't know if you brought anything different,
This is
but
the
this is the same
criteria.
paper that we already saw.
I don't think I shared this with you guys.
Yeah.
She's a board member.
Do you have the 30 points of criteria? Cause that's what we asked to see.
No, we didn't. That's not what the committee recommended. This is what came out of the committee's recommendation, was these were the weighted criteria that we would use.
So there's no metric that involves the actual quality of education.
There are some qualitative criteria that we do discuss.
Where are they? If you're saying that this is all the criteria that you're using,
This is.
then you did not use for a school district, right? You used no metrics involving the quality of education or performance of the students.
This is the criteria right here, guys. But I'm saying.
Yes,
when we
sir.
That was a
talk-
yes or
when we
no.
talk
Yes or
about-
no.
When we talk about.
That was a
well,
yes or
that's-
no.
That's what you
The
want
Board
from
of
me, but you're not gonna get a
Education,
yes or no
but the Board of
question.
Education will want that, because
The-
you've gone all
I
the way
thought
to
we were being
Sacramento
transparent.
and talked to Gavin Newsom's cabinet members.
Okay.
And what we all looked at is that there is a school district qualifying schools, but failing to look at what you are actually charged with doing, which is educating our kids, right? We're not stupid in Diamond Park. We can't stay here like that, right? So we may have started at Neil Armstrong, but we become advanced practice nurses, we become HR directors, we don't need the ABCs of things, right? We understand, right? My other counterpart has her PhD in business. So when we look at quant data and it's bolstered with skeptically and arguably malleable numbers that could easily be construed with anything, right? Like what goes into facility maintenance? What does that include? What is, so on. So whether it's subjective or objective data is already gray. But you didn't look at the one metric that matters, which is educating these kids. Maybe you should close one of the underperforming schools in Pomona because they're not getting the kind of education. They're not getting access. Those kids are not getting approved to go to Walnut. You disadvantaged every kid in this school who thought they were going to transfer to Walnut Unified because the deadline was April 7th, right? So for the parents who thought they were going to have a choice to leave the district, right, and still get a quality education for their child, they can't because those schools are impacted now. The waiting list has already started. You have pigeonholed them into a position of sticking their kids into portables on a dilapidated campus. Have you ever walked Golden Springs? Golden Springs is already a mess. It's not retrofitted for the kids who are there. Why is it that the schools in one of the highest garnering tax districts are dilapidated? And we're talking about renovating gyms in Pomona to the tune of $20+ million. There is no accountability. And Mr. Meza, like I said, he's been pink slip, there will be no accountability. There is no replacement for him. We don't know when. Your fellow board member said she doubted that there would be one to even supervise your existing construction projects. So who's going to oversee the Golden Springs construction project, which at this point is just theoretical?
So the answer to that question will be LCC3 will be doing that, and a company by the name of SafeWork will be doing the portables. So that answers your question. They manage the construction projects, and LCC3 manages the bond.
How did portables work at, say, like Diamond Ranch and some of these other schools that were based solely on portables? How was the quality of life and education for the children on that campus?
Portables are terrible, guys. I'm gonna be straight up with you.
Wonderful, I'm
They're
glad you
terrible.
said that.
They're terrible. They are meant as a temporary, fix.
Mhm.
But the problem is that, eventually you wanna put in a building to a specific location, but that costs money. And the cost of construction in this country has gone through the roof.
So why are we prioritizing renovating gyms for children in Pomona over constructing classrooms for the kids in Diamond Bar?
Because we also have parents that are very vocal about having air conditioning in gyms, and they want a nice facility for the kids.
Who don't pay for it?
No, they pay.
Who don't pay for it?
You can't assume everybody that is a parent doesn't pay taxes.
Oh, I don't. I never said they don't pay taxes. I
That's
said
what
they
you're-
don't pay as
that's
much
what
as
you're-
we pay.
That's what you're.
I said they don't
Well,
pay
you
as
can't
much
even
as
say
we
that.
pay.
You don't know that for a fact. You're making a generalized statement that may or may not be true.
Do you know what the average house cost is in Diamond Bar?
I'm gonna go here and here.
Yes, that perhaps in the future to improve the conversations that we have. Everybody here, I think, are pretty obvious. There's not one specific item, there's a number of factors. I can answer part of your question in terms of, what portables are like in terms of working, okay? I'm a retired high school principal.
I remember you were mine. Thank you very much.
I live right down the street. My kids came here to Armstrong, they went to Margaret.
Mhm.
My kids got to pick and choose which high school they were going to go to. Diamond Ranch wasn't
want to be.
We don't have time.
They didn't give us the
And
time.
I understand the urgency, but I'm still paying my tax money too, just like you are. And I'm concerned because my kids went to this school, and there is a history, and there is a culture involved. Okay?
They've given us almost no time to deal with it,
Yeah.
and I'll be honest with you, part of the outrage is the lack of transparency that to date, there are parents who attend this school who don't know what's happening to them.
I
To
would
date,
ask, please, Darren, ask the city, because see, I understand what you're saying, you didn't know about the meeting. Well, I'm gonna be honest, my neighbor, who lives 2 houses right down the street, said, it's torture you coming to the meeting. And I was like, no, I heard some rumors, but. we
Hadn't
need to
even heard
make sure-
rumors.
Because grassroots parents,
Yeah.
we have been on the street,
I walked to 30
walking
houses to print
neighborhoods,
slips
buying
myself.
signs,
Two ladies that
taking
came to
off
my
work.
house, I live on the corner.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, that we make sure that there is communication, because that's the lack of.
We begged for that at the last meeting, at the school board meeting, they have not done it to date. You weren't there for the school board meeting, I was the one who read it during my 3-minute
I'm
presentation.
just asking,
That they haven't told us.
today's meeting, or if you just take it back, contact Steve, whoever, from the city, and let sure that the residents know about the meeting. It's not fair, this gentleman didn't know.
I don't have kids, but I'm concerned enough with what I've heard from the parents that it concerns me as a taxpayer. So I would understand why I'm paying all these taxes, all these bond issues, and everything's going to Pomona, and they're closing our school. So that's a concern of mine. And once again, you make valid points,
Yeah.
but that's why I'm here. I could be somewhere else.
I'm
And
gonna go.
the other people that aren't aware need to be aware of that, so I think we should do
But the
that.
problem is though, is that Steve is married to the president of Pomona Unified School Board. They don't want anyone to know. So we've asked twice that they notify all the parents at the school that's being closed, that it's closing, and they won't do it. That's outrageous. The
I
audacity
agree with
of
you
someone to
100%.
jeopardize a child's education like that is the most audacious atrocity against education I have ever seen in my life.
I agree.
And as a black woman who grew up here, there is all kinds of access issues and minority issues. There are children in Pomona that I know because I am a civil servant and have worked that city. I know how bad it is in those schools. There is no world where those people would not bring their kids here if they knew they could. You are not giving them access. And in not doing that, what is the point of teaching a class on ethnic sensitivity if you are enacting bias right in front of their face by denying them access to an education free from harm? You wanna know what the statistics look like for children joining gangs? Right? Take them out of their neighborhood and see what they can do. See what happens when they're around students whose parents are nurses and doctors and engineers. They start believing they can be that too. We have a responsibility as parents, as responsible community members, as educators, to educate these kids first. The money is there for this school. It's just not being returned to this community, and we have a problem with it. And the problem's not gonna go away because you vote to close the school. Believe that that fight's not over. People didn't take off work, fly to Sacramento, and talk to Gavin Newsom's cabinet to let you close the school. You are gonna have a fight of a lifetime, right?
I'm gonna go here.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Can you tell us, like, right now, for the record, that the school's not being closed because of a proposal to build, like, condos or housing or real estate? Because there's a couple things that you have to look at, right? And I know that some public records requests have been, submitted. So, you know, if there's a vote to close the school on April 16th, and those public records haven't been, you know, satisfied, then that's a violation of the civil rights of all the parents that, you know, send their kids to Armstrong. Because you're making a decision without giving them a sufficient amount of time to really evaluate what's really going on here, right? Including the enrollment projections, who's putting together these projections, right? I know that in Hacienda La Puente, they were using Total School Solutions, and it turns out that the enrollment projections, there's 3 enrollment projections. There's low, there's medium, and there's high, right? So, you know, I think that there's a sufficient basis to interrogate that data, but also state law, AB 1912, mandates that if a school district is in financial distress, they have to be able to provide the underlying metrics that they're using to close the school. And then there's Naylor Act, which is, you know, if a school is being closed, right, and it's a public school, it has to be offered to a public agency. And AB 1912 says that you're mandated to tell the parents that what you're gonna do with the school afterwards, right? And so you have to also analyze that this won't exacerbate racial segregation within the school district. You have to be able to verify and to, you know, essentially, you know, demonstrate to the parents that this is not going to impact them, and it's not gonna, you know, create or enhance social inequities within the school district, right? But you also have the Surplus Lands Act as well, right? And so the school, you know, the school district is mandated to respond to those things. So, you know, it sounds like the school district is in financial distress. That's why they want to close the school, right?
Yeah, we're not in financial distress, so, I mean, the question is that we are declining. So we are deficit spending right now, but we're not in distress. So, you know, there's different pots of money that you can do certain things with. And all the things that you just set out, the Mailer Act, all that stuff, that all plays into all of this. I mean, we'd be here for 10 hours going through all of that stuff. We don't know what we're gonna do with the property right now because this property would have to go through a process. And that process is called the 7-11 process. That would take this through that. So I can't stand here and say, we're gonna do X, Y, and Z with the property. I can't say that. All I'm saying right now is why we're making the recommendation. The question about what would the district do with the property, I can speculate. I can say, here are the options, and I've done that. So, I mean, there's a lot to it, but yeah, we wanna make sure you guys get your questions answered, and, you know, the public
So that's
record
just
stuff.
definite no, the district
Has not sold the property, has
They're
not.
not negotiating with
No,
any,
no.
I
This
don't know,
is-
whatever name.
I have a
company.
question.
The district has to go through the same process, if, you know, like, for example, if you go to a couple properties right now, you will see there are some signs on those properties, but those properties went through the appropriate process. So, I'm gonna go here, here, and then over here.
No, I just want to say, you know, just being, with all due respect to, you know, everybody's opinion and concerns to what's actually going on, what can happen. You know, this doesn't affect me directly because my daughter's gonna be transferred to, middle school. But I'm still a resident of the neighborhood, and I have another daughter that goes to high school. I've seen the struggles that the staff here have with students here, because of rumors, like, us as parents, you know, neighbors, rumors, you know, we having to go down to school. Kids don't too. So that's when they start being smart asses to teachers and staff, and they have a hard time with the sixth graders. We as parents, we gotta educate our kids as well. They can't do their job because they're not getting the support that they need. Also, you know, the whole transition from the school, it scares me because my daughter's gonna have to, she's gonna have to walk to go here probably, because I work. Every situation is different as far as families, you know, so of course family sizes. So I have a daughter she's been accosted just walking from the street under the freeway. So me being a single parent and just having no concerns, I go to work every day stressed out, wondering what's gonna go on. I'm on the phone with my kids. If nothing is happening to this school, like say everything goes in process. My concern is safety and security as well as education. When I have my kids telling me, I got a dog go to a diamond ranch, I wanna get homeschooled. I never told my parents that I wanted to get homeschooled. You know, I wanted to be in school because that was my time away from home. So when my kids are telling me that they wanna be homeschooled, it's a big concern because they fear about what's happening around them. And as neighbors, they fear about what's happening. If this place is sold, my question is the time frame on what it's gonna turn into. We already have transients moving in, walking in, coming in. I see them every day. My dog barks. I had to get 2 of them because my work truck was getting into. Sex offenders are gonna be coming in. I'm anti-sex offender big time around my kids. So there's a few here in this block. As a father, protecting us as parents, you know, we have these concerns. It's not just about the money, it's not about, it's the safety, security, the education, because they're not having the experience that they deserve, you could say, that I would like them to have. You know, as far as that, you know, I'm not throwing any dirt on any staff or anybody. But I have things happen that have been swept under the rug in high school where it shouldn't be happening. I'm not raising my kids this way, and I don't know nothing about Pomona. I came from San Diego. I live in Orange County. I grew up in a gang-infested area. I made my own decision as far as where I'm at now, what I've turned out to be. At the end of the day, what's happening now is situation like this is kind of confusing the kids as far as like, well, you know, I'm not gonna do my homework because you know what, they're gonna go to school anyway. Well, my sixth grade teacher is not really a teacher because they're not credentialed, so I have to do my homework. That's another fight that I have to do, you know, with that. And it's stressful for the kids. Transportation. Kids go to, I don't know where that school is, but it's hard enough for my daughter to take a bus pass to go from here to Diamond Ranch. You know, so it puts me where kids will I get out of Diamond Bar and go back to work. It's just, I'd rather, since I'm paying taxes, I'd rather put my money into rebuilding the school and rebuild it, make it bigger, or let's go some air conditioners, an extra bathroom, whatever, to make it work, because this is the nice neighborhood here. It don't matter if they come from Pomona or whatever, but at the end of the day, every kid has a right to be comfortable and feel safe, and be able to go up to a teacher or staff and say, you know what, these are my concerns as well. With this type of stuff happening, if we can't get together and par like as parents, our kids are not gonna be in par at school, no matter where they go. You know, and I understand it's a hard position for you, you know, being the face of what's behind you, but also we're the faces of our kids. You know, so I'll be damned if this place is gonna be shut down and opened up for future housing for low income, when they're now gonna get transients coming in, because they're gonna know, oh, this school can be vacated. So then what are we supposed to do? You know, so it's gonna elevate to, is outside of the box, outside of the picture, there's gonna be other concerns as well as residents. You know, I just hope that it comes to a solution where it works out for parents. And I just found out about this meeting right now, like an hour ago. You know, I spoke to a man there, you know, he said, hey, you know about the meeting? I didn't know. I said, I could say that does it concern me? No, because my daughter's going to junior high. But I care because it's affecting all of us, and it's gonna affect us all either way. The way the government's hitting us, the money's hitting us, it's gonna affect all of us. We're all in the same pool right now. We're all just hanging off of a life jacket, hanging on. And then when you're throwing them away saying, we're gonna close the school, you're sinking us. You know, and the kids too are drowning as well in this thing. So I think, in my opinion, you know, I just hope that this is gonna become what I think it's gonna become. And I understand the frustration of the parents saying, we were just told right now. Just being, you know, nothing, transparency is a big thing. I'm just gonna end it with this one, like, why wasn't I unaware of the public when, at Diamond Ranch, when there was a coach that he got fired for taking pictures of the kids or the girls' soccer team. And I find out he's working at another school. My daughter's part of that soccer team. As a man myself, I wanted to know who he was and who he is and what he looks like, even though it didn't affect that. Why weren't we told? Why weren't we warned? If, let's just say, why wasn't, whatever happened over there, why wasn't, say, Armstrong? I'm not gonna say it happened here. But Armstrong, why weren't they notified, you know, we hired this guy here? He got fired from Diamond Ranch because the girls, you know, whatever happened. A lot of parents don't know what happened. Nothing was ever said. But we heard about the guy that, the kid that had the gun and the shooting the Sherrville. I mean, that's just something that, you know, it's a big concern because we want transparency. And if you wanna be backed up and you wanna be us to be on your side as well, you guys have to be transparent with everything. You know, everybody all here with taxpayers want to know where money goes. But honestly, I'd rather see this school get rebuilt. So that if I decide to stay here and I have grandkids, I would like them to come here. It's convenient for me. You know, the experience that he had with his kids, that he, you know, they had to go and so forth. It'll be a beautiful experience for his grandkids to come over here and share this school as well. You know, I understand the difficult situation, and I understand the loose ends, you know, just coming from, you know, just all these areas that are are evaluating, we're thinking money, we're thinking space, I'm thinking safety and security for the kids. So how are they gonna get to that other school? What if these parents don't have a car? How are they gonna get to school? They're not gonna go to school. So what's gonna happen when the kids from that other school, that number declines, say, you know what, we're gonna homeschool because we can't afford to take them to school. Then what's gonna happen with that school? You're gonna shut that one down too? You know, it's just a lot of questions arise, you know, so.
So, when my oldest son was school age, I looked at, cause his home school was, Royal. And I looked at the grade, they had a 1 or 2. There was no way I was ever gonna send him there. When I went to the district, I was like, hey, this is where he's supposed to go, but I refuse to send him there. And I can't remember her name, but she was like, oh, we can bus it to Armstrong. Great. He loved it, he sell all the things, right? My youngest, when it was time for him to go, bus was gone. It's not an option anymore.
So that was when we had No Child Left Behind, there was a provision in No Child Left Behind that said parents could exercise that option, but that legislation did end.
Right, so, cause I was just going back to her point about access, right, so my kids had it, like, I knew about Armstrong because I went to the district to find out, you know, whatever, so that's the only way I knew that there was any kind of possibility for him to go to a school outside of Oriole. So, then, thank God, my parents were supportive, so they were able to bring my kids back and forth because I was driving down there. There's no way I was gonna be able to bring them here, right? So, yeah, now that they're here, they're around other black kids, yes, that is major for me. I need my kids to be around other black kids. And what's the one over by, my 7-Eleven?
Cortez.
Cortez. No black kids over there. There's like 3. There's no black kids. This is the only school that has a good education, that has a higher number, like 6, 7, 8, whatever the numbers are over here now, I don't even know. But on the higher end of the education, this has the highest number of black kids. I don't wanna lose that. That's important to me. When you look at Walnut District, right, because they're not losing kids, and we are, where do you think these kids are going? They're going to Walnut. Why? So, I'm like, are you guys looking at why kids are leaving Pomona? Because I know several parents who left here to go to Walnut District. And I'm like, there's a reason for that. It's not just about, like, oh, I just want my kids to go to a better district. No, it's because of the experience that they had with different people, you know, that are here. No shade to the teachers, I love y'all. But there was some experience that they had, and it was just like, Pomona is not supporting them. So they felt better, like, oh, well, let's go. Because Walnut has a better support system. Whether most, and the 4 parents that I talked to, they do all have stuff with these kids. And they have a better experience at Walnut. But you guys have to look at that, because we're talking about quality, right? It's not, since you're saying it's not just about money, it's not just about property and taxes and, you know, all the things. If it's about quality, like, well, why aren't you guys looking at that? That matters. That's why parents are leaving. Like, yeah, I hear these things that there are, you know, kids aren't being born. I get all that. But if you're looking at quality too, and they're not losing kids, if they're gaining kids and they're gaining them from Pomona, like, why aren't you taking that into consideration? It's like, wait, let's take a step back. What is it that we're not doing that they are? Why are kids leaving? Because they're not just leaving out of state, they're literally going up. But why?
So I'm gonna say this, is that, you know, this is my 31st year in the district, and, you know, when my kids were younger, I would go to birthday parties, and people would ask me where I work, and I'd say, well, I work in Pomona. And I was the principal at Simon's Middle School. And they would get this funny look on their face, and they would say, you work in Pomona? And they'd almost be taken aback. Because the perception is, Pomona is a tough city. There's no doubt about it. There's some tough neighborhoods in Pomona. kids grow up tough in Pomona. But the reality is, the perception is out there is that gangs are running our schools. And I would challenge everybody in this room, everybody, if you wanna come and you want us to give you a tour of a school anywhere in this district, I want you to go and make your own decision about what you see. The gangs are not running the schools. There are some kids that are reading below grade level. They come to school with high needs. But I do want you to make the decision based on what you see, not what you hear. And again, anybody in here that wants a tour of a school, whether it's a Royal, whether it's, and I got, you guys as parents, you're gonna do what's best for your kids. I got it. My wife would sit in the driveway and talk to the parents in the neighborhood, and she would have every teacher picked out from all the way from, kinder all the way through. And she would go advocate for that, because I don't expect you guys to do anything less than what's best for your kids. I got that. But sometimes I hear people talk about, and then they talk about Walnut. The kids at Walnut are doing very well. But we also had to take them to court for district of choice, because 70% of the kids they were taking from us were Asian and white. Now Pomona is 85% Hispanic. And we're just under 4% for our African American students. I know one family where they took the high achieving kid and they didn't take the other kid. And I'm not blaming Walnut, I'm not trying to cast shade on them, but I am saying that when you have a school where there's a bunch of kids that are getting their needs met, and they're from a this is all about socioeconomics. If you have kids that are coming to school and their needs are being met, then yeah, you're gonna have a situation where kids are gonna do better. We have kids that come to Pomona that they're worried about where their meal is gonna come from when they get home. We have kids that come to school that just come from another country, don't speak any English, and guess what? We take them with open arms. But if you wanna truly go see our schools, please come and see them. Don't listen to what somebody told you. Please come and see. I will walk you through every single classroom, because I want you to see it. And that's any school in Pomona. You can go to the toughest neighborhood. You can go to Philadelphia, you can go to Alcott, you can go to Washington, you can go to any school, and I'll take you and let you walk through the school and walk through the classroom.
But I didn't mention violence or.
No, I'm just saying that that's the perception.
Royal was about their grade. Their grade was a 1 or a 2. That has nothing to do with gangs, violence, nothing. We're talking about education.
I got it.
But there's no
But you're not
metric for
responding
safety.
to that.
No, but there's no metric for safety or education. Because we know that Armstrong wouldn't be at the top of that list. If the things that matter to parents were on the metrics, were used as part of the quantitative and qualitative data, which it definitely should be. It's a school district, right? Not a business. You're not trying to make money, because that's what that tells me. You wanna make money. So you put our school at the top, because we are gonna make you the most money. Everybody in here understands that. The things that matter are not there. Quality of education, safety of the children, they're not there. Why are the things that matter to parents not there? And why are you looking at enrollment numbers when half of the school is skeptical as to whether they should even enroll next year because they think there won't be a school next year? Would you enroll your kids in a school? I don't know your cabinet members. Would you enroll your kids in a school that you think is closing next year? Or would you try to find them another one? And which school district did your kids go to?
My kid went to Chafee and had one.
So they didn't go to school in Pomona. Because I find that the proudest staff members, the ones that we can really stand behind, you know where their kids go to school? With their parents. Right there.
We have staff
Oh,
members
I
that their
know.
kids go to school.
But I'm just saying, that's always very telling to me, right? And I know the Chafee and Etiwanda programs very well. And I know that those are excellent school districts. A lot of their schools are very high performing, higher performing than the school that you taught at, or that you were the principal of. Let me just say that.
Well, I was very proud of my school. We
You
did
might
very
be proud
well.
of it, but it didn't outscore Etiwanda, for sure, or Walnut.
We had, in my middle school, we had the highest growth during the API. We had the highest growth. We were one of the top 5 schools in the Valley, which says to me that my kids can do the work. They just needed the support.
But after everything that you just said about gang violence, these kids worried about where their next meal is coming from, why would you not allow them to educate themselves in an environment free from all of that? For 8 hours a day, we could take these kids out of these communities, we could do that for them. We could take them out of that atmosphere, out of the poverty, out of domestic violence, out of whatever they're dealing with. We could put them in a safe space.
Some of that stuff exists in this neighborhood too.
Why, sure,
Let's be real.
it exists everywhere,
Everywhere.
but it looks a lot different here.
Right, right. Let me
Sure
get
does.
over here, she got a question.
I got a lot to say, actually.
Okay.
So, speaking of Cortez, there was just a murder there at 7-Eleven. Every Pomona Elementary in Pomona, within 5 to 10 mile radius, has a liquor store. So when she's talking about quality that Armstrong provides that those Pomona Unified School Districts don't provide, it's like we're thinking that you're gonna come and show us like, well, this school has this, or this is how it's gonna be protected over here, or this or that, and you don't have anything. You just keep going back to these numbers and the land value, which you said in the first meeting. I'm highly annoyed, and you said something about the district is not in trouble or hurting for money. My question is, why did PTA fund this school's painting, broken basketball rims, all these things that they took from PTA when the district was supposed to pay for it? Why didn't the district pay for this school to be fixed?
The PTA does not have to fund those things, nor should they.
But we did.
They were
We
asked
did.
to.
I'm saying
They
that's
were
my
asked
answer to
to.
it. I understand.
We
you might
did,
be
and
asking.
now we're here, and again, back to this science camp that your guys asking us to pay for, even though this school is about to close. I just don't get it, why you say that the district is not in distress. And what did you guys do with the bond? Did the bond go to this school?
So the
Where
money
did that money go to Armstrong?
So for the $385 bond, none of that money has been issued yet. There's a whole process to get an issuance. So even though the taxpayers voted for that, that money has not been issued at all to today. Now, the past bonds, some of those bonds, a majority of those bonds have been issued, and we can give you a list of where all that money went. But there's a whole process of how you issue bonds, and you don't get the $385 million all in one shot. You get it over a series of about, 10, 12 years, Fernando? And so you got.
Whatever small amount you got, what went to Armstrong?
We haven't taken any out of this 385.
Prior to
so-
that, and what about the money that we get for?
So
Fairlawn
that, I can
School?
provide you that list with all the bonds.
Wait, I'm sorry. I had a follow-up question. What she was saying, so, you know, like, I know school districts, right? And so it takes at least 6 months to clear DSA on a major renovation, right? If you guys weren't going through the process to get the DSA approval prior to the renovation, and it was money that was earmarked as part of the bond, you know, that's a breach of fiduciary duty because you're lying to the taxpayers.
You
You're
have
saying.
you have a period of time that you have to spend that money. That's what you're referring to?
No. I'm saying if you guys took out a bond, previous bonds, I'm not talking about the new bond, and you said you're gonna do something, and you intentionally didn't do the renovations here at Armstrong because you knew you were gonna close it, because you guys have, this is a predetermined decision.
Okay, so most districts don't write bonds that way. Most districts make them general so that the money can be used across the system. And so, if, you know, there's nothing in the bond that's site-specific to a specific school.
But there's usually like a general plan, right? There's some sort of like
Yeah,
assessment.
it's a facilities master.
Yeah, facilities master plan.
We just went through that whole process of redoing a facility.
So why spend the money and tell people that you're gonna fix the schools and then not do it?
So when did I tell you I was gonna fix this?
No, well, the facilities master plan, the
Okay,
facilities master plan.
The facilities master plan is a process where you get input from the stakeholders. And so, some of the top things were parents talked about safety, parents talked about air conditioning, parents talked about ACs in the gym, parents talked about redoing the bathrooms at school, parents talked about water fountains. So there's a whole, and in addition to parents, you also have staff and other people that give input into that facilities master plan, which is online and you're welcome to go look at.
Yeah, I mean, but there was several renovations that indicated that Armstrong was gonna get, you know, be brought up to speed and it was gonna be comparable to the other schools.
I don't know what you're referring to.
Was Armstrong in the master plan, I think, is what he's referring to.
Every school's in the master plan.
Okay.
But the master plan, guys, has over $1 billion of needing. It's not, it's basically a wish list of what you would like to do if you had the money. So if you have a bond for a school district is kind of a drop in the bucket, so you have to prioritize that money. And so if your roofs are leaking, you fix the roofs. If you have schools that need to be painted, you paint them. If you need a new building on a campus, then you do it.
Okay,
If you need
but-
HVAC, you do
So
that.
why
So,
wasn't
yeah.
that
So
done
why did
at
that happen
Armstrong?
here?
Yeah, so the
For
PTA
4
has-
years,
yeah.
that was not done here at Armstrong,
And the
period.
PTA had to pay for it, they were
Period.
asked to pay for it. For painting,
Period.
for the PA system, why is it that the funding that you're receiving from the city, the tax dollars everybody's upset about, right? Is still not being given here even for vital needs while the kids are on campus. So when PTA has to pay for things like paint, like a PA system, basic operating requirements of a school, right? Why are those things not being provided by the district?
The district should provide.
They did
Well,
not.
then you owe
And they
PTA our money
owe the
back.
PTA the money then,
Period.
because
You owe our
they
money
did
back.
not pay for that, they failed to do so, and they put the burden on the PTA. And what's being said now is that zero infrastructure or maintenance is being done because you've earmarked for this change. Also, the nice gentleman who led us into the building, he was from a development company as part of the closed session. So can we have a copy of those records too? Because that was the meeting that we weren't allowed into.
So what gentleman are you talking about?
Was his name Mr. Ross? It was the last board meeting that you guys had. There was a gentleman here who attended, he was a real estate developer. He was nice enough to let us into the building. And I got a chance to chat with him.
Can you give me a name?
I can get one and email it to you for sure, absolutely. And while we have the special ed coordinator, head of special ed here, I do have some questions as to what's being done for the children who have individual education plans. How are they going to be transitioned? Because we've acknowledged portables are uncomfortable for a gen ed student. What are we doing for now these kids who are going to be thrust into this new environment with questionably much different staffing, much different requirements? What are we doing for their transition? Has there been any transitional IEPs written? Or anything of that nature?
So at this point, nothing has gone to board to be approved yet. We would not hold a transitional IEP at this moment because we don't, want to make a recommendation. That is not something that we're going to implement, right? As soon as you hold that IEP, that's something that you're making implementation plans, right? So, we
Do you have any provisional plans set up?
we have RSP at Armstrong, so our RSP program is our, mild to moderate setting. So, we have the same program at Golden Springs. So mild to moderate RSP, most of the students are in the gen ed setting with supports, right? They receive supports based on their goals that are written in their individual plans. So we don't have any self-contained classrooms besides our preschool, and though that would be transitioned over to Golden Springs as well.
So has anyone spoken to those parents specifically to let them know that it's a possibility that their children would be expected to transition to Golden Springs should this, I mean, you are talking as if it is happening, right? As if the vote is already passed.
I'm telling you what my recommendation is.
Correct. So before you vote, I know what your vote is, arguably, correct? Right. So I'm listening to the superintendent who is now basically telling me where he is casting his ballot. And I'm saying to you that those students are entitled to a transitioning period and to a transitional plan in between Armstrong and Golden Springs. And for lovely children like my friend Danny, whom I adore, cutest thing ever. But a transition for him is very difficult. It is detrimental to his educational process. It is going to be an extremely difficult transition for her and for her family. And what is going to be done to bridge that gap and to ensure that you guys aren't violating his rights, right?
Those are gonna be individualized meetings, and those are going to be taken on a need-by-need basis, because everybody's individual plan is different. So we would talk about those during our IEP meetings.
During
and
the
make sure-
summer? I'm saying this
it
because this is
depends,
a
right?
marketable change. I understand that everyone has their own annual IEP process, but because of the special circumstances involving a transition and a school closure, I'm asking what individually is going to be done to transition these children academically from the Armstrong setting to the Golden Springs setting to be as least disruptive to them as possible. Is there a plan for these kids to make sure that they're not thrown into distress? Because I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't think it's gonna work. They've had that many kids on campus at Golden Springs before, it failed. It did, that's why they walked it back, that's why they got rid of the K-8 model there, it just wasn't working. The biggest complaint being the number of children on campus, the portables were dilapidated, cause they don't put lovely new portables, they put whatever the district's got. I'm assuming because this isn't even approved yet, that you haven't secured those facilities as of yet, so it's not like we're gonna be dealing with the best and brightest so far as that's concerned, because you're gonna be trying to install these over the summer, correct?
Again, we'll see what the board says.
I mean, pending that this passes.
Right now, there's enough capacity at the school for all the kids here.
So, without adding any additional facilities. So we would like a tour, no, it's okay. We would like a tour of Golden Springs, and we'd like for you to announce that tour date to all of the parents at Armstrong and give every parent here the option of touring that school and show them where their kids are going to go, what facilities they're going to use. Let's see, because I know the school's dilapidated. I don't know what time, or when the last time was you visited there. I got to go there last week. So I know what I'm looking at, and I don't see enough room for that many kids. Not in the kind of condition that I feel is acceptable for a school in a district that is used to high performance, right? But we'd like to see that. And we'd like for you to do it on a public level, so that not just the 20 parents who are sitting in this room, but all the parents, including the ones who currently don't know because you didn't tell them, right, at the last 2 other opportunities, or every day in between then, right? We'd like to have the opportunity to go ahead and tour it, like this is where your child's classroom will be, let's have an open house.
So as part of our transition plan, we can have an open house.
But are you talking about right before?
Yeah,
No.
This, or are we talking about
Is this
right
after?
before the end of this?
Oh, I think it should be after the April vote. I don't want him to have the opportunity of giving everyone the 11th hour decision of there's nowhere else for your kids to go. So let's not do that. Let's be fair, so then people have the right to pull their kids out, because they may want to, as a lot of parents have. And so you've already missed the April deadline for Walnut, right? But Rail Linda will still take kids, and there's a couple other better school districts, Claremont, right, being one of them, Laverne, San Dimas. So they've still got some options, but they won't come June. So to be fair, it should be no later than the 1st of May, because everything else has been rushed, so I feel like that's fair.
So we can have a discussion.
Oh my gosh.
I need to talk discussion about.
Well, would you just promise us all that we could
No,
have?
I said we can do that, but now you're trying to give me a date, so let's be fair, come on, you're.
Oh, don't talk to us about
But
fair
you
right
gave
now,
us
Mr.
fair.
Knowles.
No, hold
This
on a
date was
second.
not fair for me,
You're
I'm just
asking
gonna be
me,
honest with you.
you're asking me to give you a specific date. That's gonna be a conversation.
Or even if it's
So,
not.
Let's make
but what
it
you're
even
saying,
better.
here's what I
before
heard you
May
say,
1st.
here's what I heard you say. Heard you say after the board makes a decision or not,
Which would be April 16th.
and then you said that you wanna do it in early May, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I got it.
I think that's reasonable.
You have a question back there?
Is it even a question anymore? To add on to all of that, it's very discouraging to hear you say that you have all these plans to improve things and you give us no details. You expect us to trust you.
Portables. That's
Portables,
where
except we
you're
don't need the portables. It is
Portables
back
are
and
whatever's
forth.
already there.
There's already enough space, but also portables. But also portables suck.
Oh, portables are
We need to
terrible.
make
If you've ever gone to
improvements,
school
but they're
in
gonna
one.
take 5 years, but we want you to act quickly, but I won't agree on a date quickly, because that's too much for me. You see how back and forth you are, all in one conversation?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but the reality is, guys, let's be fair too.
We're
You're
not
asking me,
being fair.
you're
You're
asking me to
asking us-
set a date right here, right now.
We're asking you to agree to before May
Okay,
1st.
I agreed to do something in early May, just now.
Before the end of the first week of May. Within the first
Okay,
week or
Let me look at my
Friday.
calendar and
Or
I'll let
Friday.
you know. I'll let you know.
Because every parent here works, it wasn't a matter of my calendar, this is not my job, I don't work for the district,
Right.
I have to leave, right? I have to be sick, I have to be whatever. So when we're canvassing or putting up signs, or when we're making paraphernalia, when we're telling people that your child's school is closing, which is a district responsibility, we are taking off work to do that, we are losing income, we are losing money. My girlfriend head of DEI for Kaiser Permanente, and she's flying to Sacramento to go meet with people, and her plane ticket's $1,000. We are invested that this is not gonna happen with everything. But, right, we are all taking time and resources to do this. So when we say the beginning of the May, and this is your literal job, right? We're asking for something that should be, I mean, your entire cabinet's there, right? It would be nothing to me to sit there and say, okay, we're willing to do this. You said that you're open to having tours of Golden Spring. How about next week? The three of us would like to go on a
I'm
tour
open.
of Golden Springs in a very immediate sense, and we would like to see where you plan on putting several hundred students.
Staff restrooms. I'd like to see these windows
I
we
mean,
spoke
no,
of
no,
at the last
OSHA
town hall
will
that
deal
are
with the staff
low.
restrooms, but I would like to see where the kids are going.
So
You know.
the answer to your question is yes, that we can schedule a time, let me make sure I have your phone numbers and stuff. We'll give
I
you a
will
call,
give you
we'll
every
schedule
number
a
I've got,
time.
I'm gonna take off so that I can go to the school, so I can see
Yeah.
the school in the
But
neighborhood
the
that I
larger,
grew
the
up in.
larger open house that you're talking about has to be sometime at the beginning of May, so let me look at the calendar, let me talk to staff, I still have to talk to the principal, I gotta talk to the principal at Golden Springs. This is not just something you just
Oh,
pull a date.
absolutely.
So be fair.
I
okay?
expect
I'm
for it to
asking
take you a
to-
while to come up with that date, but I expect for the date to be in the first week of May. By or before, because I think it's fair, and I would expect you to come up with that date, let's say within the next 72 hours, so that people can take off of work.
That's fair.
Or do whatever they need to do.
I have a question here, and then I'll come here.
Yeah, I have a few things, and I'll keep it very simple, because we do have a laundry list of things that, and also data to back it up. One is there is a current bus route. We do have a bus that drops large bus that drops one student off. And that opportunity that she's talking about in recruitment for the new enrollees to be in a safe environment, it's not being used. You're already paying for the bus. There's one student, her son, that gets off of the bus. Let's just look at that, first of all. And second of all, I also came here, like, with a laundry list, but also to come up with strategies in regards to recruitment and enrollment. How you can internally recruit, but then also how you can externally recruit. But every time you come here, it's an answer of, it's because of low enrollment. But it's not just our district, it's all districts that are, going through it. Walnut is not going through it. You know why? Because they have a strong recruitment strategy, and they don't just recruit internally, they also do externally. So that is why you have students going to Walnut, because they recruit.
Well, they are
So my
responsive too.
my simple question is, what is the current strategy that you have for your district on recruiting new students?
So we've done a lot around music, we've done a lot around what's visual and performing arts. The before and after school programs that we put into place are pretty, we've done a great job with that, I believe. So we've done things for, so parents can leave their child till 6 o'clock at night. So we've done a lot, and some of the students that, we do have some kids that came back from Walnut, and that they are back at their original elementary schools.
But how are you communicating that?
So,
Because let's we had a meeting the other night, we had Walnut people in the meeting from Walnut District.
Right.
We also are working with, the union for the teachers, and I do know that some non-tenure teachers received pink slips on March 15th, so that wasn't true either.
okay.
But let's circle back, I
gotta
waited
stop.
all night, sir.
I know
but
you
let me
waited, but
just
listen,
finish really
let me
quick.
say, if you say something that's inaccurate.
It's
I'm
not,
I'm gonna
though.
fix
The
it.
teacher told us.
No. If you say something inaccurate, I'm gonna fix it for you. So who got notices? We do have temporary teachers. A temporary teacher signs a contract for 1 year. That 1 year contract is all they have, because they're replacing a teacher that may be in a resource position or a teacher specialist position or a site specialist position, something like that. We did not do teacher layouts. So what happens is that temporary teacher does get a notice that says that effective such and such date, your contract ends. That is not a pink slip, so I wanna make sure that we're accurate.
And let's circle
okay?
back on why we have those holes. Why do we have teacher openings? Why? Look
Well,
at your current staff.
In this case, that's not a teacher
Your current staff recruited Armstrong teachers to go work with you, under you, on programs, art programs, STEM programs. Those teachers are from Armstrong, and that's why we have a hole. And it took you how long to recruit teachers to fill those roles, and that's why we talked about non-credited, substitute here. He was doing a great job, but he was non-credited, like, and we couldn't keep up, right? So it's just, it doesn't make sense.
I just wanna make sure you're accurate with your statement, that's not a pink slip, okay, it's just a temporary.
Well, the
it's a
teachers are
teacher
talking
that's
like it's a
credentialed,
pink slip.
that
They're
signed a
saying it's
temporary
pink
contract.
slip.
But here's
The
the,
I
teacher's
understand
saying
that's what
pink
they're
slip.
saying, but that's
Then
inaccurate.
maybe you should communicate.
But
Maybe the director of HR should communicate
I'm
that
pretty sure we
correctly.
communicated, but people get to choose their language, and I can't control that.
You can control the narrative. You have channels and communication channels that you can reach out to the public. You have a remind system, you have a website, all of this information can be on the website, but
I
it's
agree,
not easily
but that's not
accessible.
something we would do for a teacher that is on a temporary contract, just, that's all I'm saying.
well, let's talk about the communication
Well,
note.
let me go, we have some other questions here, we have a question here, and then we have a
Okay,
question
Jenny,
here.
can you ask him why he didn't communicate to the parents that the school is closing, please? Can you ask him that, please? I will now.
Okay, hold on a second.
I have lots of friends in this
We have a
room.
question.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna go here, then we'll go here, and you can ask.
Go ahead, you can go
Yeah, I
ahead.
have
You can,
two
she's been waiting.
Okay, you
Yeah,
first.
she's been waiting.
Thank you for.
I'm a parent, well, I was a parent of a Chino Unified School District. I moved here because I had a baby. And put my son into Diamond Bar High School. He's graduating this year, just because I didn't know the area. So that's great, he's moving on. And now I had a COVID baby. And so I enrolled him here in Armstrong because it's my district area, whatever. I live by Latterman. And so I was told by my sister, which works for the Pomona school, and a friend that works at whatever Hills is up the street on Temple. And they told me that the school's gonna close. So I'm concerned because even though I work 3 miles away, it's my travel time. So if I don't want him going to Golden Springs, that's one up the street, just because I didn't like it. I didn't like it, didn't have a lot of little fun things for kids. And then went to Pantera, looked great, but I have to go up the hill, through streets, it's too much for me. And so, Mommy's on Diamond Bar, asked for great schools, they said it was, I think Lutheran, Mount Lutheran, something like that. So, don't wanna pay $900. I'm a private school kid in Pomona, so, I can't afford it. So, I just wanna know if Armstrong's gonna be outsourced or closed. Okay, Pantera's gonna be the next option, cause it's 9 out of 10. But then if the Walnuts Unified School District's closed, I wanted to see if they can keep it open for a possible closure of this place. Cause I would like to transfer my kid to a Walnut Unified School District if that's the case.
And that's a decision I don't have any control over.
You can put your child on the list now.
Okay.
It's open, it'll be a list of.
Go ahead, I've talked, go ahead.
He gave up his.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wonder if there's an opportunity to extend the vote, the April 16th vote. Is there an opportunity so we could do a enrollment campaign? Give us enough time, get the numbers up.
So, I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna say that I think how you guys approach the board is gonna be very important. I think that if you go in there throwing rocks at the board, it's gonna make their decision easy. I think if you go in and ask questions like that, I think if you go in asking questions and you ask questions about safety and you ask questions that, you know, how can you do an enrollment campaign? You know, share some of your ideas about enrollment. I have seen that the board chose to keep a school open, and it was Montview, they kept it open for 1 more year. So they did,
Wow.
so I'm just telling you guys.
But that would
you
give us
guys-
time too.
But the parents, everybody asked for that time. Now, I will tell you that there's pros and cons to everything. When you talk to a staff where they're, you know, when you you talk to a staff, sometimes the staff says, or what we heard from other schools, I'm not saying Armstrong, but what we heard was is that, look, if we're gonna consolidate the school, let's just go ahead and do it. So that's part of it too. And so there's pros and cons to all this, but I think that, you know, the 16th is gonna be important for parents to share their voice. And I think how you share your voice is important.
You're voting into office, correct?
Excuse
Are
me?
you voted into
No.
office? You're not, you're appointed
I'm appointed by the board.
by the board. The board was voted into office, correct?
The board is voting.
Okay,
no.
so you're creating a bunch of people right here, and you're putting a recommendation. It's your recommendation that this school merge, correct?
Correct.
Can you pull that recommendation? It's a yes or no answer.
I'm not going to pull that.
But can you pull,
I certainly can.
and you're refusing, based off of everything you've heard here,
I am
you are
not-
refusing to do
I am
that,
not pulling that recommendation.
based on the fact that, Roland, the things you've explained to us already, Roland Moment, the cost, everything else. But you do have the authority, I'm trying to make this completely clear to everybody here, that you have the complete authority to remove this recommendation right now.
I make recommendations to the board, yes.
Yes, but you have, right now, you could say, okay, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna pull it and I'm gonna say this is not happening. You have that authority.
I do.
Thank you.
I do.
I just wonder, when
Hold on,
you
we have people that have their hands up, so here and then here.
Yes, I'm a community member. I own a home here in Diamond Bar. My kids came here, they're grown now. And I was just wondering, I know you mentioned transition plans for students, for teachers, what about community members? I didn't know about this until maybe a couple of days ago. And I was like, okay, when did this conversation start? Who decides it? How will I be informed of what decisions are being made? What input do we have? So lots of questions, and who do I go to, or how can I be informed?
So the input that you have, you can approach the board and talk to our board. You can, I can talk to the city and figure out how we can put something out that's a little bit more widespread. We did not notify the community, we did notify the parents. Now, I'm hearing some parents didn't get that information, I'm hearing that as well, that feedback. But, we didn't do anything, across the neighborhood.
Right, and who's in charge of informing the community? Is it the city, Diamond Bar, or is it?
No, it'd be the school district. It'd be the school district.
So, because I'm concerned as to what's gonna happen.
Right.
I understand you don't know, I understand it's a
And
process.
I am willing to have a meeting with you guys and talk about, if the board does move forward, we can talk about, what impacts that it would have to the community.
And how will I know what was decided, or when that meeting will take place?
Let me talk to the city, and I also have Ronnie here, we can find a way to do some, what do we call it? Geofencing, to get something out to you. And offer, more than one opportunity. So if you have a question here, and then I'll get here. I'll get over here, Jeff.
I think it's just irritating that the district's political tone is always, don't throw rocks. We're all adults, we're all passionate, everyone is irritated with the way that you brought it to us and the lateness of it, because we know for a fact that you've always been talking about Armstrong being closed. This list that you have, regardless of you mumble jumbling the names on the side, Armstrong has always, in the last 4 to 5 years, even more, been in the top 5. So it's all about what you do. That's why we ask these questions. What did you do to increase enrollment? And you have nothing to say. The school bus with one student on it is outrageous. That's insane. I live in Pomona. I'm not sending my kid to a Pomona school, period. Like I would never in my entire life. And if we're talking about closing the school, not one school, you should just close off the district, really. You should give up this district and give it to someone else, because you guys have no control, you have no accountability, and nothing else.
No, we have people that have their hands up. I'll get to you.
You claim transparency, but you admit to not informing the parents, not informing the locals. You say if you come to the board meeting when I when I insist on putting forward this recommendation and don't throw rocks, then maybe we could get one more year, but you didn't tell anyone that it's happening. How is that not a setup?
How is that not a what?
How is that not a setup to not inform
I
people
don't know what the
about
board's
your
gonna do, you guys.
recommendation?
I was here, you were here at the last meeting.
I
when I
was.
made the recommendation.
I was.
When I told you what I was.
But
gonna
not
do.
everybody knows.
I understand that, but I also know that that information went out. I can't control what parents get at their house.
Isn't it your
Even if
job
it-
to
even-
make sure that everyone is notified?
Look, even if it's, even when we communicate multiple ways, some parents still will raise their hand and say, I didn't get something. That happens all the time, guys.
Is
Happens
that
all
not a
the time.
problem?
Yeah, communication is always a problem. It's always a challenge to communicate. But I'm saying that we have avenues that we put out for communication. So, I
You
can
have
address
unsuccessful
that.
avenues.
What's that?
You have unsuccessful avenues of communicating.
No, that's not true.
Okay, so then you have successful ones, but
We
you're
do.
just choosing not to use them?
So Golden Springs know about this, correct? Off of your,
Golden Springs.
And you
there's
know
been
about
no-
the- about
there's
this-
been
about
no
this town hall?
communication that go out to Golden Springs. That's correct.
Yeah, I have a question, like, I'm saying, like, past hours, kind of listening to everybody saying, some people are saying that they don't have the knowledge or awareness of the civic process, right? 7-Eleven commission, things like that. So I have a question, did you notify them about tomorrow's Board of Education meeting? That was a 24-hour notice, that's, very similar to the process about the real estate and, property and 7-Eleven commission, things like that?
There's nothing, it was noticed, it was noticed properly.
Maybe you should
but
tell them though.
The recommendation is not, there's nothing being discussed
I
about.
don't hear anything about.
Question, is there anything being discussed about Diamond Point?
I don't think so. Fernando, is Diamond Point's not on it? No.
Is that a no, or like,
No.
Fernando didn't answer?
No.
He shook his head no.
Okay.
And we had a question here.
Well, I just wanted to, because you were talking about communication, so, you're saying parents were notified, correct, about that? Okay, so, would you say that every parent speaks English?
Or has remind.
No, no.
Okay, so when you say that parents were communicated to, it's on English. The meeting for today is on English.
It was an English-Spanish flyer that went out. It was.
Huh?
It was an English-Spanish flyer that went out for
A
this
flyer
meeting.
that went out to,
In Remind for this
Through
meeting.
remind only.
And if you have Remind, it could translate to your home language.
huh?
If you have Remind, and you could translate it to your home language.
That it translates.
It can
It
translate.
translates to Spanish?
Or any, whatever language you speak.
Okay, that's good to know, cause I didn't know that. So, cause I know you use email too, like when you send messages from your desk, right? So you can send an email about the meeting, about the board meeting that's coming up? In every language?
Yeah, well, typically what we do, we'll do Spanish and Mandarin, yeah, so, and you can translate it, it goes out via Remind. But
I know
then-
yours goes
yeah.
out by regular email.
Absolutely. Better question than you.
As a Diamond Bar resident, like a lot of my neighbors, none of their children come to Pomona, they all go to Walnut. Why is it that we don't get a choice if we can send our children to, the other school districts? I don't think it's fair that because of grants, like we're not included. Why, who made that decision as far as why we're separate?
So the transfer process is governed by the Ed Code, and there's certain avenues a family can exercise for a transfer. And it could be all the way from, if you work in that community, if there's a program that they offer that your home school district is not. So that's all governed by the Ed Code. It's not something the district makes up, or Walnut makes up, or any other district. It's all governed by that process. There's also an appeal process, and that appeal process is governed by the county.
Are you talking about mapping?
Well,
Like,
that
who
process.
maps out for, right.
There's only in the district, is what she means.
we weren't originally a city. So remember that all of these decisions, as far as like all of that happened before Diamond Bar was incorporated. It wasn't incorporated until '89.
Well, 89.
Yeah, '89, Diamond Bar became a city.
Why don't they change
So a lot of
that?
people now feel like all of Diamond Bar schools should stay with Walnut schools and be in one district. That is what a lot of the
Well,
homeowners now, by
because
the
it
way,
seems
are
like
saying.
they're gonna start, consolidating, because since North of Diamond Bar doesn't have a lot of children that are gonna go to
Yeah.
Pomona, they're gonna keep on closing the schools, so why not just let them go to
Money.
another?
You'd be
Money.
surprised how many residents agree with you.
Money.
No, I know, because
All
my,
the
all my
residents agree with
neighbors,
many
none of their
residents.
children go
Every
here.
resident that we door knocked on, by the way, and this is important for the district to know, 100% feedback for the petition to annex these schools and go into Walnut Unified. 100% of Walnut no longer, Diamond Bar no longer wants to be affiliated with Pomona Unified because of misappropriations and so on and so forth. So expect that when these meetings are community-wide, that is what you get from the homeowners. Because they are tired of this. They don't mind paying for schools in neighborhoods even beyond their children's utilization of the facilities. There's lots of people in here who are no longer parents of students who are benefiting from the education given here. However, they appreciate the fact that the schools in the neighborhood, that children have access to a safe and equitable education, that children are given an opportunity for that, but they're not going to appreciate a dilapidated closed building. We drive to Costco, you drive right past a huge Pomona Unified dilapidated building. They don't want one of those in the center of Diamond Bar, a second one, right? So, and it raises concerns because this is in Diamond Bar, this is an older neighborhood, right? We have the freeway, we have different access points. Our city is struggling right now with transients and homeless, creating increased crime and things like that. We know, there's no measures for increased security, there's not gonna be 24-hour patrols. This is just going to become another one of those buildings that sits until something is done with it. And we just have to pray that whatever the district decides to do with it doesn't obliterate, these people's housing values, by building either A, an eyesore to the community, right? In the means of high-rise, unaffordable condos, right? Or B, some sort of commercial building, which would be even worse, because we're also zoned, if you didn't all know this, all those warehouses are for Meta. So, the affordable housing they're building is for the tech guys in Silicon Valley. So, that's what they're turning all that into, that's why they wanna buy these properties, is there's a master plan for the city to lead in that direction. Which wouldn't be a problem if your president wasn't married to a city council, mayor pro tem, individual, because the two are conflicted. And I really would like for you to look into whether or not the two of them should be participating in the process. I really feel that Patty and Steven could recuse themselves, right? It's just unethical, right? On all levels, it doesn't look good. From an optics standpoint, it doesn't look good from a legal standpoint, that either one of them have these bedroom conversations that are outside of the purview of the public, right? As husbands and wives do, right? But that they actually are talking about things that affect our children and their very well-being, right? But I do have a
Let me
question
stop
about
you real quick.
transportation.
I got a question here and here. I'm trying to take you guys in order of your hand.
So, one is a comment that just so you're aware, Walnut has already accepted a request to meet with them for the annex and for their support. The other thing is Parent Connect is a site where you can use to communicate. There's a side panel and there's also a banner. So that should be used to let the parents know when they go in there to check their students' grades, their attendance, enrollment, that there are meetings like this and that there also are closures that are going to be happening. So they're informed. And so that is the solution. So we should drive
So we
solutions
should also
here.
not be socioeconomically biased, and we should be giving these in paper form to parents who may or may not have adequate internet access in dual lingual format. Because anything out of Walnut Unified, which is a very communicative district, comes out in 3 languages and gets sent home. It might be on the school's website, but you don't have to wait to look at it, because they've sent it to you already.
I was just looking at the special agenda for tomorrow, and, right there, it's listed that there's gonna be an agreement that recommended be approved between 3D Strategies, based out of Fremont, California, to provide real estate consulting and brokerage services to the support as part of a 7-Eleven Facilities Commission, right?
That's correct.
So you're telling us that the closure of Armstrong has nothing to do with real estate, and yet tomorrow on the special
Well,
agenda,
I
there's an
also-
agreement.
I also said earlier in the meeting that the district does have quite a bit of surplus property. So for example.
Yeah, well, good, and so later in the agenda, it says that you're selling one of the school properties to Malia Homes, right? So you guys are already entering into.
Well, that's not a sales or purchase agreement.
Well, it's the amendment to the second,
Well, it's an amendment,
purchase
it's an
agreement.
amendment for the contingency, because right now, that property on South, if you know where the, if you know where the In and Out is.
Yeah.
There's a property that's right by that Motel 6.
Mhm.
It used to be an adult transition, and that piece of property has gone through the process and is on the market, and the district does have offers on those. There's a problem with, there's a problem with the contingency period, and that's what the board is looking at, to expand the contingency period for that. So that's
Yeah,
the
totally.
property specifically that is just.
Well, but what I'm saying is that you're liquidating public assets, right? As a taxpayer, I'm concerned because I don't even know how much the school district paid to acquire Armstrong in the first place. The taxpayers have maintained over the decades the, the upkeep of the school. And, it's clear that the school district's already entering into these private transactions with real estate companies, that you're willing to liquidate these public assets with private entities, and that you're gonna hire a real estate entity to help consult on the 7-Eleven. I don't see why you have to hire them at all. To do a facilities assessment, you don't need a real estate company to help consult you guys on that, unless you were preparing the properties to be sold.
This property is on the market, it has been on the market.
Which one? This one?
The property on South.
No,
Gary.
but yeah, but,
That's what I'm
okay,
talking, I'm not talking
that's a
about
second,
Armstrong.
I know, that's a second, that's a second agenda.
I'm talking about South Gary right
Yeah,
now.
well, okay, so South Gary is a public asset that's being sold to a private entity.
Correct.
Okay?
Well,
But
hold on a
you're-
second, hold on. It hasn't been sold yet.
Okay, but there's
It is on
a
the market.
purchase and sell agreement
It's
that's
on
been
the
amended,
market.
right?
There are offers on the table.
And it says Malia Homes is the
I-
one that.
That's where the offer is on the table right now.
Okay.
That agreement, if you go read it carefully, it talks about extending the contingency period.
Okay, I mean,
for that conversation.
we could play hypothetical.
I'm
all
not
day
playing,
long.
I'm trying to be, I wanna make sure that we're not misrepresenting
But,
information.
yeah, it's a public asset that's being sold to a private entity. The contingency, I mean, you could talk
Correct.
about the contingency being modified, but that's what it is,
But
right?
I'm telling you the purpose of tomorrow's
Okay, I
meeting.
understand, but no, but then the 3D strategies, that's a separate,
That's a realtor.
that's a realtor that the school district's gonna hire to consult on the 7-Eleven Facilities Use Commission, right?
Correct.
And then you have April 16th, the vote to close Armstrong. You don't see a problem with that? You're hiring a real estate consulting firm to help you.
That firm has worked for the district for a number of years.
Wow, no, I think that's
I'm just
highly
saying,
suspect.
if you go back and
Why
look
would
at
you,
the
why
board
would you
agenda-
prove this on
Hold
a
second.
special agenda?
If you look at the agreement with 3D Solutions, they had an agreement for last year. The 7-Eleven committee has been working in the past, and it's a process that, it's a long process. And so, I wanna make sure that this company right now, the conversations at the special board meeting tomorrow have nothing to do with Armstrong.
No, I did
I'm
not.
just telling you.
Well, okay, well, one final point. What data are you using on the Facilities Use Commission, right? Because if the census data from 2020, which is the most recent data for the various municipalities within Pomona Unified School District, that was during COVID. So there's a tremendous undercount of the populations that, that were supposed to be counted. You heard from various parents here that Armstrong has served, an African-American community that is, really, shrinking, across the county, right? And there's parents with, kids that have disabilities that are, have significant concerns about the accommodations that are being made, if there's a closure. And we know for a fact that school closures are traumatic, right? And so I don't see any type of mental health infrastructure support being extended to the parents. We know that kids that have suffered through school closures have lower academic performance scores overall because of the trauma often associated with the school closures. I don't think that there's any consideration, meaningful consideration for that. We've heard about the lack of, noticing to the various different populations that live here. You know, after the students, the obligation of the school district is to the taxpayers, right? To the parents and to the taxpayers. So the fact that there's been abysmal outreach, especially in the different languages, you just said 85% of the school district is Latino, right? And so I don't see a Spanish speaking interpreter here at this meeting today.
No, we did, and we announced it at the beginning of the
Okay,
meeting.
well, okay, is there gonna be one, but you know, all the
There'll be one
material,
at the
all the material that's been in consideration, that's, you know, the noticing for tomorrow's meeting, I don't see the contract being translated to Spanish, right? The contract with 3D strategies, you know, and I would urge you guys, before you do any votes, make sure that public records that have been requested are actually given to the families. Otherwise, you're denying us the opportunity to do our due diligence, and you're potentially entering into, extreme exposure to liability.
Do we
And
have
we'll be
Mandarin
sued.
translator?
Huh?
Speaking of which, more than 70% of Diamond Bar speaks Mandarin. So do we have a Mandarin translator here?
Not at tonight.
Because we're also supposed to be representing the community, the taxpayers at large.
Mhm.
And with a community that's 70% Mandarin speaking, why don't we? And why weren't we notified?
But there's one final point, is that potentially the school district is doing this illegally if the school district is actually in financial distress, right? You're saying that your school district's not in financial distress, so you're exempt from the AB 1912 requirements. I would argue that the school district is in financial distress.
You're gonna have to argue with somebody other than me, because you're bringing up legal,
Yeah, because you're gonna get sued.
arguments.
You're gonna get sued.
Well, you know
This
what?
is all legal.
Everybody
Very
has a
much so.
right, everybody has a right to file a lawsuit,
Okay.
everybody has a right to their opinion, everybody has a right to everything, and so, I'm just saying that if anybody wants to exercise that right, they're more than welcome to.
Well,
I'm not gonna tell somebody, don't do that.
But on AB
But
1912.
but
on
the thing
AB
is, I will say when somebody is insinuating that the district is doing something illegal.
Yeah.
That's where I will step up and say, I disagree with you.
Because you're saying that you're not in financial distress, but AB 1912, the memorandum by the Attorney General, Rob
You can
Bonta.
argue that with somebody
Well, no,
else.
the Attorney
It won't be
General,
with me
Rob
here.
Bonta, well, I'm just saying, this is public information. The memorandum written by the Attorney General, Rob Bonta, says even if a school district is not in financial distress, the school district should still proceed with the process that he outlined for AB 1912, as if they were in financial distress, because otherwise we run the risk of exacerbating social inequities, right?
I will say that the district has
And you
followed
haven't
all
done
the
that.
process.
No, not for AB 1912, I can tell you that for a fact.
I believe we have.
No, you haven't.
You asked for a $300 million bond last year.
385.
385?
No, don't miss the other 85 million.
Oh my God. You're closing schools mostly based off of whatever data that is analyzing costs. You have our PTA paying for basketball hoops and improvements in the school.
PA systems, painting the building.
But the
because
district
you're
isn't in
using it the
financial
facility.
distress?
So if you weren't in financial distress, why are we paying for PA systems and painting? You were my principal. Our parents did not pay for a gallon of paint. They did not pay for a single PA system. How can you say you're not in financial stress and then tell us distress?
So
and then
either
tell us
you're
to
in
pay for it?
financial distress
Let
or
me-
you're
let me
neglecting our
answer that
school.
partially.
Which one is
When I
it?
worked at Pomona as a teacher.
Oh, I mean the Diamond Bar schools.
Okay, but again, history, let me just tell you, this is not unique to this school. When I was at Pomona, I paid for supplies for kids, for students.
Oh, I believe
As a
it.
teacher.
Supplies, absolutely.
As a teacher.
My mom did too.
Okay.
I think every teacher in Pomona Unified has paid for supplies and stuff like that. But we're talking about facility painting. We're talking about
Things
the
that
PA
the district is
system
supposed
for
to
the
cover.
building.
And I heard that when I was at Pomona, because you know what, Diamond Ranch got the new stadium.
Oh, yeah, we got everything.
Couple of $100,000 track, I've been there, done that, I've heard that. What
Are
I-
you
what I
able
would
to
like,
answer
and
that
I hope
specific
someone
question
from
about the
Frank
PA
knows,
system and the paint?
We've asked her.
I answered
We're
it.
asking some great
The
questions.
district's responsible
Just
for
make sure we
maintaining
get the
that.
But it did
And
not.
I haven't seen it.
I'm not, I wasn't part of the PTA meeting when that discussion happened.
Get that information.
I'm just saying, I'm telling you, that's.
So if we're not
You
in
wanna be a
distress,
part of it?
why are parents being asked
He
to
wasn't
pay?
physically there, so it's not
But
his
he
fault.
doesn't want to
how
be a
is
part of it.
Yeah, that's not his
Yeah.
problem.
Just one second, there's kind of a lot going on, I really want a clear answer to
How
that.
did the discussion about, let's just say the basketball nets and the paint? How
Let's
did that?
say
Include the
Okay,
PA
we'll get
system.
to
It
the-
looks like it
Basketball
doesn't
nets, I
Well,
can
let's
make an
do,
argument
let's do
for.
all three. How did that discussion get to the PTA? Is Is anybody on PTA here?
Yeah.
Yes, the president.
I'm gonna
Here you
say,
go.
I would assume your
You're the
principal is
president?
asking.
Right
No,
here.
That's
And
not the
here's-
point,
Are
we
you
don't have to
president?
have the
Okay,
president.
can you help me understand why that conversation occurred?
Requests come like that through the principal, we have a meeting and then discuss the budget. What I think everyone is upset about is the money that we come up with as parents, we're not being used for events such as trunk or treat or assemblies that we, put on for the students. What was happening is we're paying for things that the district should pay for. So whether there's miscommunication at a higher level, maybe that's it. However, it doesn't take away from all the money that the parents have put in to buy the $7,000 or $8,000 PA system and to do the painting and then to buy even soccer balls.
When you
the
say
kids.
PA system, can I just ask a couple clarifying
The
questions?
PA system that
Is
you guys
it,
are
is it
using
one that you
today.
roll out like during recess, or is it for the entire school, the PA system
So
that's
you're
wired
downplaying what
in?
the system
No,
is,
I'm
but-
asking a question.
Yes, of course. It is anything that is used outside in this room, the mic that everyone is using tonight.
So
the
PTAs,
setup that you see
PTAs
here,
can purchase
PTA.
things like that.
That is correct.
But when you asked me, I thought you were talking about the PA system for the district, or for the buildings. But yes, the district's responsible for that. If a parent group wants to buy a portable PA system for kids or for the school, they can do that. That's
Wants
not,
to, but
that's not a.
This is Armstrong wasn't given the money to purchase it. Do you
Correct,
understand?
and the
So
district,
why are
the
we
district,
not
the
giving
district
the
typically
school
doesn't,
money?
the district does not allocate money for portable PA systems. And so
Is it
many
allocating money
times,
for paint?
many times, the paint, and I'm gonna ask some clarifying questions about the paint.
Sure.
What was painted?
I don't know what, it wasn't in my term, so I don't know.
You guys, anybody know what was painted?
If you would like, we could go get the books from upstairs,
What's that?
if that helps you. I don't think it should matter what was painted. If anything at this school was
I'm just
needed to
asking
be
for clarification,
painted,
guys, cause
the
I'm trying to
district
figure
should
out.
have paid for it.
For example, here's a good example. If I'm at a high school and the class of 2025 wants to do a mural on the campus, the ASD could raise the money and do that painting. But if you're asking me, are the parents responsible for painting, taking care of this room or painting a room somewhere, my answer is the district's responsible for that. That's all I'm saying.
What has been the reinvestment since these numbers came out? How much has the district reinvested to increase enrollment and what efforts have you gone to secure the school? Or has it always just been the enrollment's low, therefore it should close? Because what I've heard, and maybe you can clarify this for me, is that any attempts at a enrollment fair or anything of that nature, telling the community, hey, we're here and we're doing something different, we have a new principal, we have all these resources, look, we have free childcare. People don't even know that's available, right? So what has the district done to communicate that to the community at large?
So in the presentation that I did the time before, there's a whole slide that is dedicated towards what the district has done for enrollment.
Are they
And I have Lilia, our deputy superintendent here also. She can share with you, all the programs that we've added across the district.
I
We
remember
have
them, they're
tons of
mostly for high
programs.
schools.
We purchase instruments, Lily,
So
you
we're
wanna talk
asking
about
for
programs just for a minute?
Armstrong specifically, isolated, not the high school, because I did see, I think what you're referring to, which was heavily targeted towards the high school population. I'm asking you what you've done for Armstrong's demographic specifically to resolve the low enrollment number.
Because you said it's been on the chopping block.
So since we came back from COVID, one of the biggest things that and I talked about this last time, but transition of kindergarten, one of the things that we have looked at, and Armstrong was our first school with transition of kindergarten. What we noticed across the district was when we opened transition of kindergarten, we attracted families and they stayed. So that was one of the recruitment tools. The other thing that we started doing is making sure that, and I sat there and sort of, we pay for everything, and I don't know where the miscommunication is. So during COVID and right after COVID, we had money from the federal government, SR, we had CARES money, and we went after the schools to really talk to them about what they needed, what the schools needed. So it's maybe not just Armstrong, but everybody across the district, because the money was flexible. So what we did is we started to purchase items for schools. And when I hear, don't know in the PTA, and again, sometimes the lack of communication, but that's something, and I heard it earlier too, about teachers paying. We've been really making sure, even with this school, like in the past, in Armstrong and Cluster 4, as we call this Cluster 4, the Diamond Bar, it was the haves and the have-nots. If you could afford it, you could get a research teacher. If you could buy an intervention teacher. What we did a few years back, over 4 years ago actually, we started leveling the playing field across the district because we needed to make sure that the resources we give with the kids, because we treat our kids to make sure they have the best opportunities. And so we put, if you notice here, one of the things that we did also is we put a resource teacher here, a full-time research teacher, a full-time literacy coach, a full-time interventions teacher. And I know it fell through, not because the school was on the list, but a site specialist. One of the things that Dr. Ambrose, as the elementary director, had recommended that, sometimes the needs have grown, especially after COVID. We had behavioral issues. We also put counselors here. So, and if you talk to a lot of districts, they don't have what we have in resources. And so that has really, continues to bring in more families and say, wow, across the cluster, not only here, but at Lorbeer, we actually extended our dual language program. We have Mandarin and Spanish. At Diamond Ranch, again, the feeder schools, we were talking about not only recruiting for Armstrong, but what does it do for the whole system? And so what we did is, one of the things after COVID, and you've heard it, mental health for our students, a lot of them were in crisis because of the isolation. So we put wellness centers, we invested in Diamond Ranch. And so again, it isn't just Armstrong, it's an elementary counselor, but again, what is that feeder school? But again, if there has been miscommunication about items that need to be purchased, we have different funding sources. And so we always look at allowable uses and what that allows. I don't know where, again, buying equipment, I think that is our sole responsibility, as Mr. Knoll said. I don't know where that is coming for the miscommunication, but again, we have Title I money here. We also have Learning Recovery money. We have Title II, so when teachers need conferences, when they need material. In special ed, one of the items that we worked on really hard with the union is that special ed, again, teachers need supplies. So we make sure that every teacher has $250 every semester to pay for, other items so we make sure with with Ms. Reese, to make sure that is. We've really tried to ensure stability in teachers, and yes, as Mr. Knowles mentioned, we've expanded our art program, our music program, but we also have tried to maintain our teachers, especially our students with disabilities. We have a recruitment, a retention bonus. So we make sure that our teachers are getting a $5,000 retention bonus. We started that last year. This is the second year as we're finishing the year, and we're doing, because again, one of the biggest hard to fill, believe it or not, is special ed and music. Music has become the one, not math anymore, not science, not language arts, are hard to fill are right now music because of Prop 28, and that was a voter initiative. So again, as we're building, as we look around the room, when I look at the art, many times we just have to pay young Rembrandts and all that. We pay for all that now to continue to keep the families here, and also understanding that the costs are very high. We really have worked really hard to recruit, but again, as you talked about that bus, it's not the only student that gets dropped off here. There is a bus route for kids from Westmont to Lorbeer, and that became safety. So we have to, but we don't have the NCLB because that money went away. So we have tried to make sure that we keep our kids. But if you have asked,
Okay,
I have back here, and here.
Yeah, I have a question specifically to that. My son last year had services required by his IEP that weren't fulfilled for the longest time because positions weren't being filled. And I'm glad that you put in whatever that bonus is to get some very great teachers to help him thrive in this small school, which is specifically why we came here, and probably why 50% of other parents transfer their kids in, which is a good thing. That means that we have a school that people want to go to. The issue that I have is that now that 3 years of progress My son going from not talking in class, having his headphones on because he has sound sensitivities, being built up to now he's speaking in class, he's getting all of his services, he's thriving, and now you're gonna drop him in another school and sacrifice all that progress. So you say all of these things, saying like, oh, we spend all this money, we do this to improve, and then we shatter any improvement that has happened by closing a school is ridiculous. No
I had a
question.
question, and then I had a question.
Okay, so I wanna make a very salient point. I really appreciate what you said because I think all the things you did worked, right? If we look at the TK and kinder here, nursing, right? We do an action, but then after that, we come back and measure the effectiveness. It worked. Because if you look at the TK and kinder, yes, enrollment is down in the upper grades when they were dealing with poor educational services, when they had combined classes. Those kids went through a lot at this campus and the education quality suffered. But now, the kids who benefited from those programs that you put in, right, they are here. These are the parents that are fighting to stay. They are telling you that we're here, we want to stay, we're going to continue to come. The trajectory went from being very low to turning around and enrollment went back to a high. That's why we're asking for new numbers, because you implemented all of that stuff in 2020. You just said it. Those numbers are from prior to that implementation, right? They don't show the projected quantitative data that shows that the enrollment is trending up. The only reason we're having a faltering in the enrollment now is because people are saying the school is closing. Why did you enroll your child in a school that is closing? But prior to that, when they didn't do that to disrupt the enrollment here in this school, you had the ability to really continue to capture that audience. Because I have my girlfriend who has a PhD who's like, why isn't everybody's kid coming here? I have free childcare, I'm getting a private school education. Armstrong is back. That's what she told me. Only to have it fall off again and I get another call. Oh my God, girl, the school's closing. This is what we're trying to tell you. No one ever circled back to see the effectiveness of all that money, all those programs, all that is going to be wasted because those parents aren't going to stay in Pomona Unified. There is this gray bubble where everyone believes everyone's just gonna go to Golden Spring. No, they're not. They're going to continue to matriculate to other districts that listen to them. If you call Walnut Unified and call the superintendent's office and have a problem, they're gonna have somebody call you back the same day. One of the members of the board or whatever to address your issue and it will be resolved. They will look at cameras if your kid got in a fight. Somebody called your child a dirty name. Oh no, they didn't, because parents are getting called. There is a responsiveness there that the district is not hearing. There is a tone deafness that is not going to be acceptable in the education world going forward. This system that you guys are using where you dissatisfy parents, if you disenfranchise us, will no longer exist in another few years. With those vouchers, it is going to end the conversation about all of this. It is. Because when you don't satisfy your consumer, they're out. That is what education is going to turn into. It is going to turn into a consumer-based product. Do I want to send my kids to this school where they don't listen to me and the education sucks, or do I send them elsewhere? The thing is that Armstrong had something. They got a new principal. They started bringing in new instructors. They started making progress, and it's being stifled. All those implementations that you said happened after 2020, which is why I think we need to revisit the matrix. But we need to add things that are important like school safety, like the number of violations and fights. You know why kids in the older schools fight? Like that gun getting pulled out, right? I can tell you, I went to Diamond Ranch. You know why we fought? Haves and have-nots. They met too late in the game. Kids are nice in elementary school. We didn't know we had Nikes or Schnikes on, okay? We didn't. We were cool. We just know when my girlfriend didn't have money, I told my mom, we're packing another one. She said, why? I said, I don't know, but she doesn't have one. I didn't know they were living in their car. You understand? That is the access. That is the touchdown. That is what I'm fighting for these kids to continue to have, is that. And we're taking it from them. I found out as an adult what my kids' friends were going through. What? I've had children who had to live with me when COVID happened. They were living in group homes and all of a sudden were homeless and came to stay in my home. And the next thing was a lockdown. These kids are going through real issues and you are denying them access to a community that can help them, that fosters something different. And I don't know why it's parents advocating for that instead of instructors. Instead of the instructors are scared, I do know why they're not doing it. But why the school board? Why all of this cabinet? Why are you all not upset? Do you think that they're not going to eventually lay off teachers? The whole teachers union should be mad. You're saying that we have 38 schools and we need 32. That tells me that we're laying off teachers. Cool? We're laying off everybody, right? But my question for you is, why have we not gone back to the data, back to these analytics and seen the improvement? See, as parents we know, because we see the kids in TK and kindergarten who are leveling up in grades. We expect continued enrollment to be high. If you stop bolstering us, we can get parents from Pomona to sign their kids up to Diamond Bar School. They wanted to, but they were told there was no bus route. And that wasn't true. There's a lack of communication in this district that is unacceptable. Unacceptable. I wanna know who's responsible for that. Because I'm mad at you, but I don't even think it is you. I know better. I know that there was someone else who was delegated with the task of notifying people, and why are they failing and being allowed to fail so miserable? In the private sector, you'd be fired. I was fired. If I told a nurse to do something and they didn't do it, first of all, the patient might be dead. Second of all, okay, they're fired. They're so fired. And they may never work again. Cool? Because I'm gonna call and report them, right? Where do we stop the negligence here? Where is the district going to take responsibility for some of this? When are we going to talk about data that matters? We're not putting out signs. Did you drive here? Did you read the signs? We bought those. Okay, parents are, there are neighborhood members who are ordering signs because they want you to see that they are mad with you and they're not going to take it. It's not that we're trying to throw rocks at you. We're trying to get you to see. When did you visit this school? Did you visit the TK or kinder? So if we talk about lateral mobility, right? So upward mobility in a school setting, right? TK, kinder, those kids in first grade. That first grade's gonna need what? 2 teachers, because we already have them. We can retain those students, we can continue to build enrollment, but it is not working because you guys are telling people ghost stories. And we can't attract new students to get the numbers up if you tell them we're closing. We can't even retain the old students. Your staff members are crying on campus in front of their kids, and I'm not upset with them because they are hurt and they know. These are college educated people who are choosing to go into education. They could do something else. They could make more money, right? They could, but they're doing this because of the kids, and I wanna know when you're going to put students first. So that's the Walnut mantra, by the way. Students first, kids first, and they mean it. When is Pomona going to mean it? When are those metrics going to talk about the quality of education for our children? When are they going to talk about the safety concerns for our children? How about Pomona wouldn't get $100 million lawsuits if they would pay attention to the concerns of these parents, right? If they would listen to their students. These lawsuits and stuff like that, they are a response based upon negligence. Why are we not fixing the problem? The problem is not the operating costs of Armstrong, it's not. The problem is low enrollment. Why are people leaving? Because we're not responsive, because we have lost touch, because so many of these answers I've asked you and you do not know the answer to. I can tell you, I saw the principal of Walnut Unified 2 days ago, Thursday of last week. Because every time there is a school event, he is there. He is there. On the boots on the ground. He can tell you the name of the teacher, he's gonna pop in, he's gonna say, hey, he knows parents. On a first name basis. It works. There's a formula here. And that formula going forward is going to keep all of you employed, right? It's going to be bigger than just Armstrong today. Armstrong today, Golden Springs tomorrow, the next school after that, because all our kids will be in private school because we can afford it.
I was just gonna say,
know what to detect. My son's lips are blue or he can't be out in the sun. But getting him here, because I'm a transfer, was difficult. And every year I struggle with the bus. Other schools, like Lorvier, Golden Springs, they know that the bus route's going. They have the forms. This year, my sister, her daughter goes to Lorvier. She called me and said, hey, the bus is on. And I said, okay. So I called transportation and they said, go to your school, they should have the forms. Armstrong didn't have any forms. Armstrong didn't even know about the bus. I had to get a form from Lorvier and give it to the bus driver because Armstrong didn't know. And this is every year that he's been on the bus. So where's the lack of communication? If more people knew about this bus, and it's a bus that stops like from different elementary schools. It goes, I have the list, I think it does go, I know it does Bayport, Westmont, and then it goes, I don't know the actual route, but it's Golden Springs, Laurier, and Armstrong. But there's more schools, it's not just Bayport, it's others, but we never got the information. The 3 years that my son has been taking this bus, Armstrong never had the information.
But where's the accountability for that? Where's the district's positioning on why a bus route that could be helping these children, Latino and Black children, who need a way out, right? Why are they not being told that? Why are they not being given that?
Can you answer that, like, seriously?
Why?
Please.
Why? So I think they're people that wanna go from one school to another school, they do go through the district transfer process. As I said earlier, we are an open enrollment school district. So if a family, submits a transfer request, they can, if it's, if it's in that pathway with the bus, they can ride that bus to the particular school. But the parents initiate the transfer process.
That's not true. Cause when my youngest son came along, they were like, yeah, no, it's not even an option anymore. Like, you can't even be
And the bus you're talking
grandfathered in.
about was an NCO bus, NCOB bus.
But why not say like, hey, those kids that are transferred, because you said 50% are transfers here, right? So why not go back and say, all these kids, if you guys can populate all the Black kids that are in the school, and you can send us a reminder, that I know that you can populate all the kids that are in Pomona, that are in that bus route. So even if it doesn't stop at Arroyo or Cortez, if it stops at Bayard, is that the one that's by, Stater Brothers?
No, that's Lincoln.
Okay, so whatever school that's around, say like, hey, you have an option to, drop your kid off at this school, and it will go to Armstrong, or it'll go to Diamond, or, Lorbeer, or, like, why not?
So I just got the schedule. It goes to Washington, Alcott, Bayhar, Roosevelt, Westmont, and Armstrong. Why don't those parents know? The parents here didn't even know, right? So it presents a significant challenge for parents getting kids to school anywhere, right? When you're going to school in Pomona, and I worked there with crack addicts, with, meth addicts, with homeless people, sex offenders, and all the rest of that, you think those parents wouldn't put their kids on a bus to a school that is in one of the Forbes list best places to live? We literally, Diamond Bar makes Forbes list. Why then would you deny children in your district where you could make that difference, right? Why would you deny them that? Why, and I'm not saying you specifically, I'm saying the communication though. I ultimately have to leave the buck with you, that I still have a school that is 50% at least uninformed that there is a potential closer. That's unacceptable. I would say more than 50% of the parents did not know about the meeting tonight. That's unacceptable. More than 50% of the parents do not know about April the 16th. That's unacceptable. More than 50% of the parents did not know about the last board meeting. That's unacceptable. We are taking off of work. We are losing money. We are putting blood and sweat and tears. We have had kids out with bronchitis, with masks on, passing out these videos. Have you looked at our website? Have you heard these babies on there begging you to save their school? And it just brings me to tears because some of them can barely talk. And they just want so badly to be able to maintain their education. Some of them will have to go back to Pomona, inevitably. Let's not lie to everybody and say, oh yes, Golden Springs will take everything. No, they're not. They're gonna have to prioritize kids in Diamond Bar. And again, kids in these neighborhoods will not be served. that it's wrong. And when you sit there and you look at the community and you look at the children that you're hurting, that's why I'm leaving work. And I'm in tears because I think of people like Danny who have these beautiful kids. And they are losing services because the decisions being made by this district uncaringly, unapologetically. There's no accountability. There's no, well, Bob Ross was supposed to send out the flyers and I don't know what happened, right? There's no level of atonement. There's just your enrollment is down, so we're closing you. It's wrong. And then you accuse us of mudslinging. We know exactly what we're saying. The last, 2-3 schools, they were sold to BlackRock. They have a whole initiative to purchase undeveloped school property, and they are the highest bidder, by the way, when our homes always is. Cool? So, and that's not affordable housing, and we're not trading off for anything wonderful. We're giving way to a culture that does not support children, that does not support equality, that does not support anything that this district should stand for, since most of your occupants are minority based. And I cannot believe that we are now establishing all of these programs that we're failing to create an equitable education environment for these kids. And these are all schools that I know. My mother taught at Bayhart. She taught at Washington. I've been on those campuses because guess what? If I called in sick, she took me to work. It's like, you're helping. You know what I mean?
We have a question.
Yeah, I just had a question. So what compensation are you gonna give to the taxpayers? Because right now, the school district, this school provides after-school recreational opportunities for students. And if you close the school, there's no guarantee that those after-school recreational opportunities are gonna continue. But even more so, if you decide to sell the school to housing, which is likely what's gonna happen, then you're eliminating an amenity, right? And that's an amenity that actually increases the tax value of the properties in this area. If you build housing and do congested, it gets congested with the amount of traffic, right? Then you're gonna actually create a negative adverse impact on these surrounding homes. And how are you gonna compensate the residents for that?
To answer your first question about the program, the plan would be for Golden Springs to continue the program, to have them at their site.
So you're gonna eliminate the recreational opportunities?
No, that's not what I said. I said that Golden Springs would have those same opportunities for kids. So they'd have the same program. To answer your question about taxpayers, I mean, if the board moves forward with a recommendation and the site goes through a 7-11 process, the community can still voice their opinion about what they want. And that recommendation can go to the board as well. So if you're advocating for, let's just say you're advocating for high density, which I know you're not, that's what you're asking for, you could advocate for that. If you're advocating for medium or low density, then that's what you could make sure that message gets to the board.
Well,
Can you do that by voicing your
but
opinion
I would
like you are
advocate
now?
for not liquidating the public asset, maintaining
I
public
understand
asset.
that, I understand that, and that's the tough part about this, guys. That's not falling on deaf ears. I understand this is a tough situation that you're in, your children are in. I'm just telling you that, this is not a recommendation I want to make necessarily, but
You don't
this,
have-
you
but
have
if
to be
you don't
fiscally
have to,
responsible.
why are you?
It's not too
So you're
late.
saying the district-
It's not too late at all, sir.
It's not
You
too
have to
late,
be
sir.
fiscally responsible.
Correct. So why are we not unloading all of these vacant properties before we even consider our? And why are we not trying to recapture the kids that are here, that you are consistently losing to Walnut Unified? And if they build new housing, where are those kids going to go? Where are they going to go? Because, so you're saying, how many kids do you think Golden Springs can have?
I think they could handle the 249 that are here existing right now.
Right.
And then based on future plans, they can hold a few more kids. The average size of a school, elementary school in California, Fernando, 500. So, you get a school, an elementary school between 500 and 700 is a good sized elementary school. And that
How
would
many
be,
will be at Golden Springs after this program?
if all 249 go,
Correct.
what's the approximate number, Fernando? it's in my head there, the enrollment's on. I'm gonna go back and I'll come back to you and answer your question. Did you have a question?
Yeah, we wanna know, to accommodate the influx of students going to Golden Springs, what is the cost to accommodate that, as far as like, you know, the little raggedy bathrooms that you're talking about, versus them coming to Armstrong, and us building another bathroom here or another structure here?
That's a tough question to answer, because
So
I
you
don't
guys
know.
decided to displace our students, but you didn't look at the whole full picture and take into consideration multiple things.
Well, if
You're
we-
presenting, I'm still talking though.
Okay, I'm
You're
sorry.
presenting something with no full explanation, no full drawn out scope, and you're leaving us with these questions and it's angering.
I understand.
But that was the point of this meeting, was to make up for those unanswered questions in the first one. And we still have so many unanswered questions. And now I'm about to leave because this meeting was pointless.
So we don't know the actual cost savings. Because there is a cost of bringing in these portables, of housing the additional students, the additional staff on Golden Springs. We don't know the differential of how much we're actually saving.
And it depends on what the board approves, you guys. If the board decides to put a brand new building there, okay, and I'm not saying that we're putting a new building there, I'm saying if the board decided that cost can differ. The cost can differ because of the tariffs that are going in place right now. Everything after COVID.
Oh, yeah.
You took that into consideration when thinking about.
But the building
tariffs that were implemented,
Guys, you're
yeah, 4
asking me
days ago,
some
haven't even
questions you want
been taken into
specifics on.
consideration.
Specific.
But if you say, Darren, what are you gonna put specifically at Golden Springs? I can't answer that question right now in terms of new facilities.
Why not, if you know that hypothetically we have
Right.
250 students?
Right now,
So
we have
hypothetically,
the
what are these
classrooms to
answers?
accommodate Armstrong at Golden
So
Springs.
let me ask you this, so we're willing to close Armstrong without knowing what the short or long-term financial gain is, we're just
That's
going
not
to
the
close
question,
it.
that's not the question.
But this is, that
Question
is
had
what
to
you
do-
asked
the
the
question had to
reality.
do with
That is
facilities
what, that is
and
what
the
we're
cost of the
asking.
facility.
No, it was, what is the cost savings in between moving all of our students to Golden Springs and housing them in the immediate sense and the future projections of those costs, which would be the gentleman here?
Both.
Yes,
It is
that is
both.
exactly what I heard her say.
Either there or here, what is the cost? That had to have been thought out or
Yes.
worked out, because
No.
what if it's gonna be
It is.
$100 million? Like,
Sandra,
it has to make sense.
So the answer to your question, and I wanna say.
This is the gentleman who's in charge of oversight of our building and the construction funds and so on, the tariffs and so on. I heard you do an illuminating presentation on electricity, although I disagree with you on that, but, I would say your projections were off. However, I would say this, so since the gentleman is still here before he's no longer an employee of the district, why don't we let him answer how he thinks this is going to go with a minimum 25% tariff, which means a 40% increase in building costs for consumer goods because they come out of China. So how much do you think the savings, or do you even think there will be a savings when we have an existing building that just needs minor updates versus a school that will then be filled with portables? Or is that your long-term plan, to leave Diamond Bar students in a bunch of portables instead of permanently housing them? Which I would say is then very ineffective as far as the utilization of that bond, of any money or resources that we've allocated to the district. I would say that that is an egregious misuse of funds. But, so I would say there has to be some sort of plan for permanent infrastructure on the campus of Golden Springs. What is the playground space going to look like beyond? Because they can't build, they cannot expand. Those are residents who are not gonna sell you their houses, okay? And then knowing that we are looking at tariffs that are adding 30 to 40% cost on construction, and I know construction costs very well, right? That's in the here and now, that's post-COVID, right? Going forward, it may be even worse. And then we have supply chain issues on top of that. So what you're projecting is 5 years, could be 10, could be 15. These kids may never actually see that. It could be the next Diamond Ranch, which took 25 years to build, right? So how long are we looking at keeping these kids temporarily housed in portables? What is the projected savings? What is the projected cost of moving all of these children? And why is that not on the analytics? I think these are the things that I saw that people had asked the prior meetings that are not being answered. What's the cost savings? Are we even saving any money?
So
I'm
you
sure
do-
we make money on
When you do a
settling.
consolidation, you do save money. On average, it's about $500,000 to $600,000, and it's mainly in positions, guys. Because all the elementary schools are pretty much staffed the same way, with the exception of we do have a formula that's in out of position control that says that if you have this many kids, you get an assistant principal, or if you have this many kids, you get, you get X number of campus supervisors.
This is a very specific question.
I'm trying to answer your question.
What are you presenting on April 16th to them, explaining if we move to Golden Springs, we're gonna spend over $50,000, or we're gonna spend $250,000? What is the?
So what I hear you saying, I wanna clarify, you're just asking, what's the specific facility plan to be talked about at?
Cost. I want a number
Cost.
in comparison.
The plan and the cost?
Yes, in comparison to those Golden Springs students moving to Armstrong.
I gotcha, okay.
Mind you, I already asked you this in the first meeting, which was the point of this meeting.
I understand, that's not an easy answer, guys, I can't give you a specific answer on, we're gonna do.
But then that was why we were asking, what is
understand,
your
guys, but
third
I don't-
merit,
I
like,
can
what is your
only-
point
Why are we
list?
rushing to vote then?
Yes,
If
and you
don't
can
know
shut it
the
down
answer,
right now, sir.
these
You
questions
can shut it down right now, sir. If you don't have the answer,
Why
shut
are
it
we
down.
voting now? But I'm just being honest, why are we voting on something and you do not have the full financial outlook of what you are voting on? You are
No,
sitting here and saying.
there's two questions here that I'm hearing, if
The
I'm wrong,
savings.
correct.
Where's the cost savings?
The cost savings, and I answered that.
$500,000 to $600,000, and you're.
It's in positions. The next question,
So
what I
wait,
hear
so
saying is
hold
that.
on, I have a question about that.
Well,
So
can
you're
I
saying
finish?
it's not yet, it's $500,000 to $600,000 in positions. So where are the layoffs, where are the teacher cuts, where are the staff cuts that equal that? Because you said you didn't pink slip anybody,
We
so
didn't.
I wanna know where the $500,000 in savings is, if you're saying it's in staff and you didn't pink slip anybody, and we're past the due date.
So there's a couple things to address that. So the first thing is that the kids that are going over, teachers will go with them.
Right.
Okay? Program will go with them, so the staffing for that will go. Campus supervisors can go with them. We have food services here. If there's vacancies there, people could bump into those positions, otherwise they would go to other schools. I don't wanna.
So where's the $500,000 to $600,000? Hold on.
I'm telling you
Where's the
that those
$500,000 in
positions
savings?
would
So
go
if the
away.
positions are carried
In
over.
addition, like Lilia said, you have a resource teacher, an intervention teacher, and other positions, that those positions already exist at those schools.
But also, I wanted to share, I think Mr. Knowles, I know, had sort of alluded to this. If we, at Armstrong, and not just this school, we have a, in our LCAP, our local control accountability plan, we have really tried as a district for years now to try and reduce combination classes. And so what happens in a school like Armstrong and other schools, but here especially, we would have, as Mr. Knowles mentioned, combination classes in almost every grade because of the smallness of the class. What we do to try and prevent, again, looking at students, and I know you mentioned students first, but we really do care about our students first. What we did is in the local control accountability plan, we spend quite a bit of money, and in Armstrong, and so when he's saying about 500,000, it's those combination classes that now when they go to a Golden Springs, do not need that extra service. So it's an extra service above and beyond, because we try and make sure, so we try and always make sure that we have 2 combination classes at the most.
May I ask
And
you,
then, yes.
How many combination classes are on this campus?
We have a couple.
Okay, a couple.
But
Does
we
that
would have had
represent-
more, we would have more, we would, the way
Does
we.
that represent
yes,
$500,000?
About, because we would have one
In
at a
staffing?
K1, a 1, 2, 2, 3.
You wouldn't have
and
it at
so-
K1.
and-
K1
and-
is in
and
Packer.
three-
They're
three,
quite full.
yeah. And so what we do is we
There's
go
3 of them,
all the
correct?
way through the 6th grade.
Okay, so wait, I just
So,
wanna stop you. Have you seen what the K1 enrollment is here?
Not today.
Okay, so
I
there's
haven't.
multiple
Okay,
classes, there is
but-
no chance of them being
but-
combined.
But there is, as you go up, especially in the 6th grade, 5th
There is.
grade, and so what we do is we try and reduce it. So we look at what's called our CSA, which is our numbers, our enrollment numbers.
Correct.
And what we do is we look through and say, if we will work very closely with HR, and what we do is we make sure that, you know, we're looking, and it's just not this school, it's all the schools. 'Cause we
Because she's
try-
talking about-
And we try and make sure,
I don't care about
if we
us.
didn't put
But
this
I do care
extra
about this
teacher,
child.
this would happen. As Mr. Knowles is saying,
I
is
think we'd like to
those.
see a detailed plan
We-
on
we-
how you're going to save $600,000.
We could.
Because we
look.
don't pay
We
teachers
could
that
look.
much here.
So, our average teacher makes about $100,000.
Not here, for sure though.
Yes, with
For
benefits,
sure not.
Average
you know what?
teacher?
With
Not ours.
benefits and everything
Not
that
ours.
goes along.
I'm being honest
That's
with you,
what we
ma'am.
do. But we could look, we
I
could
just
look.
wanna make sure
Yes,
that you're aware,
yes,
I'm telling you
yes.
things that I know for a
Okay.
fact, they do not.
Okay.
Not
Well, we could
including
show
the
you,
full compensation
we
package.
could pull out the CSA and show you how we calculate
Here's what we'd like
how
to
what
see.
we do.
We would like to see
So we
that
have no
every
problem.
parent in all of the community is notified. We'd like to see the meeting at the beginning of May. We'd like to see the projections for the savings and not off some statewide average, actual real dollars, right? We'd like to see where the savings is and where it's being accounted for, because you're saying staffing, and I don't see $600,000 worth of staff, unless we lay off people, but we've missed that deadline. And so since we're not going to lay off or fire 6 teachers, I don't see it, except for the non-tenured teacher who was weak slipped or whatever, will argue with nomenclature later. That being said, I don't see $600,000 worth of savings. I don't see it in the future.
Before you go on, I hear what you're asking for. Let's make sure you're asking for a list of where that's coming from, right?
Where the savings is
Savings
going to be,
coming
and I would like a cost analysis between the continued operating costs of Neil Armstrong and the prospective construction and operating costs of Golden Springs with the new occupancy rate. And because we know that you're meeting with real estate developers, I'm sure they can tell you what the projected family structure and additional need would be, and where those students are going to be educated, because you'll then have 2 impacted elementary schools, because they can't go to, was that Pantera? Can't get into there.
I'm gonna go here, here, then here.
So we'd like to see that. We'd also like for you to take the time to actually see because as lovely as your assistant superintendent is, she had no idea that we had that many students enrolled in pre-K and kinder and first grade, right? Who all have multiple classes, which shows that our enrollment is increasing. So we'd actually like for the district to take the time to get to know the school at closing. So maybe you should take a tour here and get to know the increased need that we have, right? But we'd like to see that school site at Golden Springs where you're thinking about housing the kids. And per each grade level plus, additional children, which foreseeably there'll be children who need to come into kindergarten and so on, how you plan on housing them, both for, educational purposes and the after-school programs.
You better give it to somebody else, cause he's got the next question.
What's the numbers looking like classroom size at Golden Springs?
So
How
the
many
class-
students are you gonna have per class?
So the classroom size depends on the grade level, so.
So you have an idea of that right now?
And it's driven by the contract. So if you're in grade 4 through 6, the max you can put into an elementary classroom is 32. And that's governed by not only our collective bargaining agreement with the union, but it's also by Ed code.
Okay.
Okay?
Have you ever been in a classroom with 32 students?
Yeah, question, are they all gonna be 32?
Guys, I answered his question, I'm trying to answer.
And I understand, believe me, I mean, let me tell you something. 18-year Teamster, you wanna talk about contracts? I've gone through a lot. I know contracts, I know unions. I was shop steward. I know exactly what you're talking, I have read contracts, know exactly, I know my went left to right. And I've gone toe to toe with people like you in management, and I've won. I know the method, believe me, I know the method. And I have no problem getting loud and using that method, all right? So I'm letting you know right now, we all vote here. And you could bring that to the school board, and you let them know you have a lot of angry voters, angry and upset voters. And you're saying right now, we've been asking you, they're going on 3 hours. We have so many questions, and we've hardly gotten any answers from you. And any of you here either, been minimal. I'm calling you all on the spot, all right? Because we've had a month and a half, and this is our 3rd town hall. And anybody here from Golden Springs? Anybody? One person from Golden Springs. And you want to talk about not throwing rocks, not being upset? We're being transparent. You can come to my office. Sorry, sir, that's not flying. Because we have how many days left? Tell me how many days left do we have? I know.
Till the 16th.
Till the 16th. I gotta take off of work.
Next week.
You know, we've come back after spring break, and I'm glad we had this turnout. People flied in. I know people who probably got off a plane to come to this meeting and they're jet lagged. Believe me, I knew. So what I'm telling you right now, make a choice. And believe me, I want to hear that choice tonight, and you're still saying no? You heard it. It's still a no.
So all the requests, by the way, that I made.
Let me go to this
just
question,
really quickly.
and then we'll go here.
You let me go first,
I'm gonna go
Thanks.
first, okay.
So, all the requests that I made, can I make those pursuant to the Public Records Act too? So we'll just add those to the
It just
resume.
depends on what you're asking. You can
Oh.
put whatever you want to in writing
So
for the
I'm
public
allowed
records.
to make those verbally.
You can.
That was why I was so clear about the list
But
that
I'm
you
just saying,
moved on to staff.
be clear on what you're asking.
Oh, excellent. So I would like the cost differential in between the continued operating costs of Neil Armstrong or the move to Golden Springs. I'd like it projected for the next 10 years. Okay?
Okay, you understand that when you do a
Yes,
public
I do.
records request, that it's something that we have to have in hand, that we can provide to you? If you're asking for something that doesn't exist right now, then the district won't have that. I'm just clarifying for you.
The district doesn't know what the operating cost will be of sending the kids to Golden Springs. You said the facilities are there.
Well, you want a projection for 10 years.
Well, how long have you projected?
I'm just telling you that. I'm trying to
Our
respond to your
facilities
question.
guide, do you know how long
So-
that they've projected this for?
For the operating.
The facilities, the operating costs, have you looked at it?
We have a baseline of what we currently spend per school.
Are you able to share it?
Wait, hold on.
Yes.
And for how far ahead is your projection currently?
As far as operating costs?
Correct.
It's a year-by-year basis based on inflation and also any additional rates that come up, so it's a forecast, but it's not.
So you have a forecast.
We
So,
typically do
hold
it on
on.
a 3-year
How-
budget process.
3 years, excellent. So instead of 10, I'd like 3.
That'll work.
So can I have the 3-year projected cost for Neil Armstrong continued operation and the 3-year projected operational cost for Golden Springs? I'd like to see the full facility plan in detail for how those students are going to be housed. I'm sure you have that, right? As well as the utilization of staff. I'd like to see the projected savings of the $500,000 to $600,000 that you quoted. I'd like to see where that's being saved and with which staff positions. And I'd like to see the potential for the vacancies of the additional staff transitioning from Neil Armstrong to Golden Springs. I would like to see the projected educational plan and special education accommodations, the projected transportation plan going forward as to how the children are going to be transported to Golden Springs, including those from Pomona and Diamond Bar outside of the walking distance allowable by state law. I'd like to see the plan for how you're going to accommodate the additional 2 staff restrooms that were taken back, plus add the additional staff bathrooms to be in compliance with Cal OSHA, because you'll have all this additional staff from Armstrong going over, right? I'd like to see, the projected improvement cost and maintenance for Golden Springs. I'd also like to see the projected improvement and maintenance costs for Neil Armstrong. I'd like to see the full security plan for Neil Armstrong. Should you close it down, what will happen with the actual facility, its ongoing maintenance and those costs. I'd like to see a projected detail of any staff members continuing to work here and what those operational costs will be and who, in fact, or what those staff members, departments encompass. I think that's where we'll start, but don't be surprised if there's an email to follow. But that is my, public record request I'm verbally requesting, be submitted. The attorney can go ahead and submit those steps as well. Also, I would like to be given the dates for the potential open house at Golden Springs. I would like to be given notification of when the parents are notified at both Armstrong and Golden Springs of the potential consolidation. English, Spanish, Mandarin, please. Let's see. Oh, and the community notification. I would like to see the district's position upon the potential conflict of interest for Steve and Patty Todd, who are husband and wife, and should not be involved in the process at all. As well, I'd like to see the district's position on the potential conflict of interest of the other board member, who receives his money from the unions, IVW, and a few of the other local unions, because this is a construction-based project. We know ultimately he's going to, have his constituents employed because of this. Also, I'd like to see the projected replacement for Mr., I'm sorry, I forgot the last name. Mesa, and the guideline plan for the transition of his new, successor, and how that will be implemented, since that'll be the individual who's going to take that on. I would like to see the percentage of playground space that will be retained after the additional, portables are moved onto the campus. I would like to know what percentage of portables will be on the campus of Golden Springs versus the campus of other schools within the state within comparable cities, ergo Walnut, right? Because I think you'll find that it's disordinate. I would like to see the additional safety inspections, and all of their results for the Golden Springs building, and any, what was those records for the safety inspection? Yes, the results of your last OSHA audit, both here and there. I would also like to see the performance index via testing for every school in the top 10 of that list. I would also like to see the safety profile for the top 10 schools in that list. And I would like to see the overall educational and academic performance, access to childcare on each of those campuses. I would like to see the staffing and school building to portable ratio on all of the top 10 campuses, as well as the crime rate based on a 5-mile radius or locality, whatever you have, based upon each one of those schools. And I would like to know and have records of any physical, sexual, or other criminal behavior on any of the top 10 campuses, because I know there's some that had issues, like the child who got raped recently on one of those top 10. I pointed it out, and it was the school where the child was raped because the person snuck into the bathroom because of inadequate resources. So, I would like to see all of those. Oh, and I would like to see what increased security measures we're going to take, how we're going to adequately provide proper egress points during emergencies, what the active school shooter, earthquake drill, and fire plans will be for Golden Springs, and what they are currently for Armstrong, and how that many students are going to get to safety. Which all of those things should be public records for Golden Springs, what their plan is, and whether they're able to accommodate that number of students at all of those points. I think that's all.
Question here.
I'm just gonna mention the traffic management plan for Golden Springs, you know, for all those cars. I'm sure somebody's ready for that.
One more request, you're right, the traffic plan that you have to give to the sheriff's department, I'd like a copy of that.
I came a little late, but has there been any conversation about what happened with that?
He refuses to answer anything that won't be official until he insists on presenting this as an
I don't know if
option.
there was a decision that was made.
I should be able to give you an answer on that soon.
The vote is April 16th, so.
Are you saying before the meeting? Before the meeting?
Let me see if I can get that answer to you before the
Just Tedesco and all the staff here, thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. I know that kids are going through testing right now as well, so thank you for doing it while they're going through testing too, by the way. You know, thank you so much to the board too for having us go through this while our kids gotta worry about testing. Thank you so much. But thank you so much to you, to the staff. We all love you. Thank you for knowing my son by name. Every time he walks into here, all the staff, and I hear you call out everybody's name when I walk into here. That's been a pleasure. And we're gonna fight, and we're gonna continue to fight to keep this place open. So all you, thank you. Thank you so much. Because you're the backbone of this district, and we appreciate it, and that's the reason why we're fighting right now. Because we love it here, and we wanna keep you guys here, along with our kids.
Well, I have a question. Maybe I should say it, maybe I shouldn't, but I'm just gonna throw it out there. I know in the first meeting we talked about campus supervisors, right? And I know I have approached you before, but I just don't got clarification on when we met with Human Resources and we got the letter, right? Where it said that for the 25-26, we were reassigned, but yet we're still not closed and stuff like that. And all I wanna know is, what is the possibility and the reassurance of us campus supervisors and some of the paraeducators that were assigned to high schools, that some of the parents left already, but they had their special needs students that they've been with those paraeducators for so long, right? So for me, like I said in the beginning, everybody knows how I feel about the school and, you know, my opinion. But what is the reassurance that I will not get to go to the school?
So the campus.
That I got reassigned. As a matter of fact, I even took the man's pen because I was so upset at him for signing the paper, you know? And I know he explained something, but I still was not clear. I just wanna know.
If the board votes yes, then the plan would be to send the campus supervisors and special ed paraeducators to Golden Springs. Now, of course, that's an individual choice also. But the plan would be to move the positions to help support with the transition.
But what happens, like, for example, where I was sent at, right? It's far away from here.
Right now, Mr. Montevilla made that decision with what he had at the time.
Uh-huh.
The board hasn't made the decision yet, so let's say the board says yes.
Mm-hmm.
If the board was to say yes, we would create the positions at Golden Springs, and then we could transfer people into the positions. And again, people that were impacted by this, they would get the priority there. You and I had this conversation.
So
too.
priority, okay? Because,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't leave my kids.
No, I got you, thank you.
But, Darren, I'll add a little bit, there will be conversations with the union. And so when we make decisions, because let's say there's 10 people and there's room for 6, right? We have to either consider items like seniority, so the union will have those conversations about, you know, the effects of this.
They get to negotiate the
Yeah.
effect of a layoff.
And you know that, I understand that, but that's funny you mentioned seniority, because when I was there in the meeting, the reason I took his pen is because I asked him, is it by seniority? He said, no.
Not necessarily, but the union gets to negotiate the effect. So once we find out what the numbers are, because it's also dependent upon, there's some steps that happen afterwards. And HR isn't the first step. The first step is finding out where the kids end up going after that.
And he
Once we
gave
see
you
that.
he gave you the correct answer. And I don't wanna get too technical, but in terms of a layoff, if you have bumping rights, that is determined by seniority. If it's a transfer, that's different. That's not based on seniority. So bumping rights, yes, transfer, no.
And it'll be different for campus supervisors than it might be for your paraeducators. Because your paraeducators, there's a programmatic need there, right? The relationship with the student is obviously gonna put that as a higher priority than it does, you know, if you're not necessarily attached to students, you serve all the students. So it is gonna look a little bit different depending on the job classification. But our goal is to do the analysis, make sure we know what the staffing needs will be at that school, and then, you know, create the positions that are necessary, and then have those conversations. It takes a few steps. If the closure happen, if they vote yes, and we start going into action, we have to do it pretty quickly. But again, we can't start taking those steps until we know what direction the board is gonna go.
I think the part that's insane is that, say there's like one step, 100 steps. You guys are only at one step. You don't think about all of the rest of the steps, you only stick to that step because you don't know yet. You would have to think in advance, or you don't think in advance, so you just think on like, the spur of the moment.
We do have all those steps.
Okay, you're just not giving us all
Well,
those steps.
again, everything is not just like set in stone. Just like the example we showed you. Is it a bumping right issue or is it a transfer? There's little nuances that do play into all these steps, but in terms of the steps of consolidating a school, this is not the first time, unfortunately, that we've had to do this. So in terms of the transition plans for staffing, transition plans for students, transition plans for all, we have a Gantt chart that is like exhaustive. And so we have all that, and again, you know, you guys are asking good questions, and your questions deserve to be answered. But we are, but some of the things you're asking are, you know, just like you asked me who's gonna be the principal.
Okay.
I would love to give you that answer right now, but.
I'm not interested.
I have a question for you because
But
I
I'm
think
just
you
saying
can
that
answer
that's.
it. Originally, we were all told all the staff was moving with the
I
children.
heard that too.
This was said on multiple platforms, multiple times. Every parent who's attended this stuff had the same understanding. I understand a layoff when I hear one. That was one. Cool? So when we start talking about seniority and all the rest of that, those are unnecessary conversations when we said that we were going to go ahead and transfer all of the staff. Did you ever think that that kept some parents from initially participating in the all-out revolt that you now have because they thought, because they were misled and taught, I'm gonna use misled, I don't wanna say the L word, but that's what it feels like, okay?
I would much rather use that than.
I'm going to say that, but I just want you to know that we are replacing it in our head with the L word.
But the
Because
question was.
we were told that all staff, including support staff, including new aides, would be going to the new school site with the children. Some parents were like, okay, this is happening, I will accept that as being the case. We are now having to jog that back and say that that may not be the case, and now there is an additional interruption that's going to take place in these children's lives besides an involuntary transfer, which we know makes children academically suffer, right? At critical years, when they are learning fundamental educational skills, we are choosing to inflict this upon them because we said we are not in duress, so we are choosing this. We are choosing to actively put these children and their best interest in the back seat for metrics that do not consider them.
We're displacing you.
But, right, what I have as a question to you, is that even possible? Because in my mind's eye, I think, okay, maybe there is some sort of ratio of student to staff members, student to security, student to new aid, or what have you, ratio. So why are we not keeping all of our new aides? Why is there even the possibility of any of them being funded? Why are they being reassigned if the closure is fictitious? Then until it is actual, we should not be reassigning anybody, right? But since our fictitious closure, we all know is not fictitious, right? We are living in a land of realities, which is why you have parents who are so strongly opposing you for the fictitious seat. When our opposition is fierce, we are told it's fictitious, calm down. But on the practical application side of things, the district has made aggressive moves towards a school closure, and it seems imminent. And we are going to fight that as if it were imminent, because that is the appropriate thing to do. Also, we are going to fight to retain said staff members, because it is wrong. You are already taking these children to school. You made a promise to these parents, and if you'd like, we can play it back to you, right? Because we recorded that one too, right? The promise that you made. And you promised that these staff members would be moving forward with the kids. Why is that not being honored? I understand the fiscal accountability piece, but I think these children are going to be in duress, and all of them, to some level or another, are going to be in duress. We don't know how these children are gonna be treated at Golden Springs. Golden Springs has its own microclimate of student issues, okay, and sensitivities, whereas students have been accepted here for their differences and so on. That may not be the case when they are a little fish in a big pond, because all of a sudden you have massively increased what it is these kids have to deal with so far as student population. And I think that that supersedes your bottom line. And if that is where you are saving the $500,000, you need to chalk that up as a loss, because you are getting a school that you're going to sell for a minimum of 50, 60 million, right, projected in earnings. So I think that just needs to be a cost of doing business, right? Is not a double slap in the face. That's where people are talking about annexing their schools, and like, you just keep all our tax dollars in, because it's super offensive that these kids can't even keep the faces that they recognize. These women talk about these children as if they're their own, because they are. They're with those new aides longer than they're with their parents, right? So the impact that they have on any child, SPED or gen ed, right, is tantamount to their ability to transition and to cope with what the adults in the room are doing to them, not for them. This is not a situation where we are doing this in the best interest of the children of Diamond Bar. We are not. We are doing this to them, and we are hoping that this doesn't stifle their education. But I can tell you right now that you're dealing with kids who are depressed, they're exhausted, there are a lot of mental health issues going on, and these women's presence gives them comfort and solace. And before you allow anyone in your cabinet to cut any of them, you need to severely consider that, because there will be a lashback like, I don't know what force. But what I'm hearing you say is that there will be layoffs because they're staffed.
So the ed code requires us to, by March 15th, if we anticipate any potential loss of enrollment or staffing, if we anticipate any consolidations like we're facing right now, and we have about a 6% decline every year in student enrollment. That's been the average over the past, I would say, I've been here for about 28 years. We've seen it consistently drop. When I first started the district 28 years ago, it was about 34,000, and we're now under 20,000. So we've seen that consistent drop in enrollment over time. So in what we're doing as we're facing this, right, and we know that technically the school should be staffed at about, I'll talk about teachers, with the formulas for student enrollment, it should really be at about 6 teachers out of the general fund. That's what the numbers mean. And when we talk about combos, the combos that I've dealt with over the past 3 years, and even before when I was the elementary director, and I've worked with HR to do the staffing, some of the classes with the staffing that was allocated was actually not just a combo of 1-2 grade levels. The reality was at the time that I had the potential for a combo that would be K1-2, 3-4-5, 2-3-4, and I would have multiples of those, right? So when we're looking at March, the ed code requires us by March 15th to take precaution, like to notice people in the event something could happen. We always have the ability to rescind, and one of the things that we do, particularly for classified staff, is we didn't do a full-on hiring freeze, but we did watch to make sure our number one priority was that no one would lose their job outright, which is a full layoff, right? So that was our number one priority, that if this is worst case scenario, because we're trying to prepare for that. You ask us to have like different avenues for us to see, run the gamut, and we can't detail each one, but we did consider, okay, worst case scenario, we don't want anybody to go home and lose their job outside. Right, and so at March 15th, because we don't have the positions open, and we don't know that this move is gonna happen in the creation of the positions, right? At whenever the board and everyone else decides what the staffing is gonna be, and we'll do that, collaboratively. At that point, then we can make decisions about bringing them back. Our goal, our priority is obviously to keep some consistency for the students, like we've done that for some of the other school sites. But staff inevitably, and one of the things that happens, is they'll decide to, I wanna go somewhere else. I know this principal over here, and, they will make their own decisions like that. But obviously for para-educators, for that connection with the students, but there, students experience changes like that, every year. It just depends on their IEPs, it depends on paras getting promoted or moving on and deciding to change. So when that happens, we do a lot of either rescinding or reassigning of staff in order to make sure that we're keeping with the program. And that's where the union really comes up and steps up for their members, and will tell us what, some of the priorities are, and we'll negotiate what the system is going to be. But it does, at the end of the day, have to be fair, right? Once we agree on a set of criteria, we do have to apply that fairly to the staff, and in the same fashion. So March 15th is a precautionary thing, it's a noticing timeline. We do have up until the end of the school year to make any kind of rescissions, and even after that. If we end up finding that enrollment goes like, it balloons over, like let's say it closes and it balloons over, we might need even more staff to go over there, right? So it's really dependent on who ends up staying and how many kids end up being present. And then we'll go through the process of bringing everybody back in, and according to whatever criteria we You say no one will lose their jobs outright, but then you also tell us that there's going to be a $500,000 savings in positions not being filled, so which is it? Which is it?
5 to 6
So, when the district does staffing, we do get staffing for the entire district. We have a huge number of employees that are retiring this year. Those positions will be vacant. So if somebody leaves a position that is gonna be eliminated, they could transfer into a position that there's a retiree there, or somebody that's choosing to move out of state, or whatever the case may be. So that's something that position control and HR, they have that big picture already, based on what we have today.
Based on a presumption?
No, it's what we know, because when
You
you,
don't
when
know
you
what
decide,
people will
when you
choose.
decide, like for example, right now, we already have teachers, if teachers declare before September 30th that they're gonna retire, they've already gone to board, the board's accepted the resignation or retirement, so we already know what positions those are already. We have classified employees that do the same thing. We know they're gonna retire, we know how many office managers will retire. We have all that information, so all of that plays into your overall staffing for the entire district and for Golden Springs and Armstrong.
So when you make a comment.
Hold on a second, I have a question.
Will Ms. Ty recuse herself from voting on this matter, given that she's married to a council member for Diamond Bar, and that if the school's closed and it becomes real estate, it becomes a housing development project, then the city would get revenue from those additional housing units, that would be a conflict of interest.
So, Mr. Ty is not gonna be part of the decision-making on the 16th. He doesn't vote
But
for the
his
governing
wife
board.
is.
His wife does.
Yeah,
And
and
so,
she has
the
ties.
question is if there's a true conflict of interest.
Yes.
That's the question.
Yeah.
And so I will share that information with Mrs. Ty, and I'll share it with our attorney, but at this point, I'm not aware of any conflicts.
Well, she's married to a council member, the city
Council
would.
member has no authority over this decision. He
But
doesn't vote for
the
this.
city would generate revenue from housing development.
I
Yes,
understand.
absolutely.
I understand what you're trying to allude to, but that doesn't make it a conflict.
Well, yeah, because the city would stand to benefit from the school district closing so that they could get the additional tax revenues.
And then
Again,
there
there's
are
a lot of assumptions.
conversations that can be had outside of the purview of the public because they are married. It is a conflict of interest because these are all supposed to be public hearings and public decisions. And when you have a person who represents both entities who are married and can have, and also by the way, he's in real estate, so that doesn't make it any better. When you have two people who represent both entities, it is an obvious conflict of interest. He has controlled Diamond Bar City Council for quite a while, and he is not the only family member that they have had on the city council, pro tem mayor, mayor of Diamond Bar, et cetera. It is an egregious understatement to say that Steve Ty, who I've known most of my life and know his children too, and Patty Ty do not have a conflict of interest. Both of them should recuse themselves and have no dealing and no decision making on this at all. The optics on it are terrible for Pomona, to be clear, because the conflict of interest is so readily available. It is a public spectacle and one in which you have pointed out in the board meetings, acknowledging Mr. Ty. If he has no affiliation with you guys, didn't know who he is.
We do that for all of our city council members.
There was
Diamond
more
Bar
than
and
one
Pomona.
city council member sitting in that room that day, and that was the only one acknowledged.
We acknowledge, we notice they come in, we do acknowledge them. So, you had a question here? Anybody else have a question?
I have a random question. When classes become over the 37 students you said, is there a fine
Can't
for
go
that
over
long?
32.
You can't. So you can't, as the district, pay a fine
Or-
to allow yourselves to go over that number. That's impossible.
You can't go over what is required by A code and our collective bargaining.
And what happens if you do?
You get in trouble from the state.
And what is the trouble you get in?
You get in trouble. You would have to request a waiver from the State Board of Education to go above that, and we wouldn't do that for elementary.
Have you
For
ever done it
secondary-
before?
What's that?
Have you ever done it before in
No.
any of your schools?
No,
Gone over the class size?
no.
Can we have the, current census for Golden Springs, all of its classrooms and all of its teachers, public records request as well?
Did you get
What are you asking for? The census?
The census.
You're asking for class size?
Yes.
Well, yeah, we can provide that. Yeah, we can provide it.
You were gonna check with him on the total enrollment?
Yes, Fernando. 645, if they're combined, yeah.
Oh,
So,
you know what?
can I just address, so 645, that would make Golden Springs one of the largest schools in the area, and it would have a higher enrollment than Nordier?
It would be a good sized elementary school.
It'd be a
Nordier
lot.
is 623, right? Somewhere around there.
What's Lower Beard right now? They're 632.
Are you aware that Golden Springs campus is 1/3 the size of Lower Bears?
677. 677.
I think, and that's probably pushing it. Golden Springs campus is 1/3 the size of, Golden Lower Bears campus. Are you aware of that? How many children that is on that campus? Actually, and also public records request, can I have the reason for the closure of the, 7th and 8th grade program and any documents, complaints, parents and teacher complaints from Golden Springs during, the 10-year period when they had K through 8? As well as the traffic concerns and accidents, because I think the kid got hit, if I'm not mistaken, by a vehicle.
You're really close to the street.
During that period.
There was a fence taken out over there, I think for, God knows how many months, at Golden Springs.
Oh, yeah.
Any other questions, you guys?
Will you be notified, word, it's late. Will you be notifying Golden Springs by any of this?
Yeah, that's what I committed to.
You committed to?
Who's the person in charge of notification? Because we've heard all of this and still it didn't happen, right? I think there's an apology owed on the basis of, lack of transparency and lack of communication. I think that you need to take that notice at least, because we were promised that. I wasn't doing that. Nice lady, normally, and you really did tell me that you were going to notify these people, and we're still at less than maybe 50%, and the 50% that you know is because there's parents who are committing themselves to walking in the drop-off line and doing everything else. It's kind of like the work. So who is the individual who was supposed to have done that?
That's my responsibility.
So you are the individual who individually sends out the mailers for things like school closures, et cetera, essential closures and so on.
No, but I mean, ultimately, it's my responsibility.
Right. Well, public records request, I'd like to know the HR staffing for the district, who handles the PR, public relations, and any public communication documentation. And I'd like record of any documents that have been generated so far as the closure of Armstrong, the consolidation, and with which entities it was shared, and in which languages. And I would like any, notification of any community notification, which at this point there's been none, correct? So what are you planning on doing to remedy that and be very immediate?
I'm committed to a meeting in the community.
How are
We
you
would send a
planning on
notice out.
notifying that?
We would
To
send a
every
notice out.
homeowner within your jurisdiction, they'll receive an urgent letter from the district notifying them of that.
I didn't say urgent, you said that.
Well,
I'm telling you,
it is urgent.
we will communicate with them. Via, how we communicate via email, we communicate we do
But how
mailers,
emails
we
for-
do mailers.
I'm saying you wouldn't have the email addresses for the community members.
No, but we could do a mailer.
To the
We could do it-
taxpayers.
We could do it to the taxpayers.
Okay, that would be helpful, because that would save us a lot of money. We'd rather our fundraising not go towards that, but I think that would be fair. Is there anything else? Okay, that's all.
Okay, you were gonna share it.
I'll share it privately.
Okay. You guys, any other questions before we call it? Thank you for coming, thank you for hanging